Coffee thing.
Right.
It's coffee.
All right, I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Hartford Selectboard on Tuesday, January 17th, 2023 at 6 p.m. Our first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. Would anyone like to lead us today?
I'd be happy to.
Okay, go ahead.
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag, United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty, justice for all.
Thank you very much. Order of agenda. No changes. I don't know if the executive session is necessary this evening, but we can discuss that when we get to it. So we'll start with public comments. We'll start with people in the room and then hear from those who are joining us by Zoom. If you want to speak, please approach the microphone, tell us your name and town or village of residence in 5 minutes. I will note we're getting into a lot of stuff. We're going to cover ARPA and capital improvements. So if you have comments about that, I think we'd appreciate hearing them at the time we're doing those discussions. So with that said, if anyone in the room wants to comment, please come on up. Not seeing anyone in the room. Do we have anyone on Zoom? Anyone with their hands up on Zoom? Okay, doesn't look like we have any public comment tonight. So we'll go to board reports, motions, and ordinances. The first involves the VA cutoff bridge emergency repair, the grant, and the contract.
Mr. Chair, do we not have?
We don't have select board comments today. All right, so I believe Chris from Public Works come up and talk to us about the VA cutoff bridge repairs.
Who's monitoring Zoom? Who's monitoring Zoom?
Guess one of us will have to monitor it.
Yeah.
I can do that. Hold on.
It's curious.
No, I can do that.
They can do that, Alex.
Curious if
So Ally
monitors.
Yeah, let me just get on as a
Yeah.
panelist.
There might have been somebody out there for public discussion. That's all.
They said-
Oh, they said it. Okay.
But
But
it
I'll
probably
take
makes more sense to have one of us do it, so we
Okay.
can have Ally.
Sorry to interrupt you. I didn't mean to.
No, that's fine.
I'll make sure her voice is there.
Okay, Ally's gonna come over. She can be made a panelist because she's gonna monitor any hands that are raised on the Zoom for us. Don't want to. Kim's in the Turks and Caicos, so I think she's having a better time. So Chris, please.
So quite simply put, the current state of the bridge is remains in poor condition and has many reoccurring maintenance issues with the joints due to the ongoing separation of parts of the bridge. The state notified us that we have a safety issue with 2 of the joints, and we need to respond to them and what we're going to do about it. And now that we're on notice, we have liability associated with it for health and safety of the public. And so we then went and did our due diligence and reached out to the lowest bidder of the previous repairs to trying to get it done in a timely manner, who came in 1/3. The previous bid did excellent work on the ones they did touch. We got 2 bids from them. One was for $20,000 for one type of repair. One was for $30,000 for another type of repair. The state has recommended the $30,000 repair, which is what we chose last time as well.
Mhm.
We then sought out a structures grant under emergency conditions from the state. They have awarded it to us. Of that, we have an amount under $4,000 to pay for, so it's quite a bargain. It's a deal for us. To get that going, we need authorization to accept this grant and to sign it, and they are waiting our signatures. So quite simply, we'd like to get it in the works. It's dependent on weather. Any break in weather we get that's acceptable, we can get the contractors on site. We'll have to monitor the bridge for any concerns. We may have to close it if they can't make repairs and it gets worse in the meantime.
Any questions for Chris about this? Lenny?
Yeah, Chris, the biggest question I have is this grant that we've got and this town obligation. this is of course is a Band-Aid because we're going to replace the bridge.
It is simply a Band-Aid. That's all you can do without reconstructing the bridge. The bridge will remain in place for traffic for approximately a year. It's going to stay in place while you bridge goes up.
So will this,
Reconstructing bridge-
the biggest question I guess I have is, we're going to obligate
for
funds for this.
approximately a
Is-
year. It's gonna stay in place, but it can happen again. and
So will
again.
this, so we don't know if there's anything else on the bridge that,
That bridge is, no, this is the only things the latest inspections have identified.
Yeah.
There's no guarantees how long this will last. You can't do it. You have to reconstruct that bridge. to get
I
it.
understand. And do we have an estimated date for the new bridge that's going to be put in?
It's
to-
over a year. It's about it's gonna start this spring and it's gonna be over a year. So
Okay. So I'm gonna just ask the board, I understand that we have a chance to fix this bridge for $3,000 cost to us. But it is a cost to the taxpayers of the state of Vermont for this grant. This money's coming from somewhere. I'm not sure if we could live with the bridge closed a year and put this money into something more cost effective if it was just going to be based on a year for that bridge closure. It has been closed in the past. During the winter time.
Mr. Chair.
this is a life safety issue. It's not only important that if one of these metal pieces comes loose and impales a car, goes through a window, creates an accident, or hits a bicycle or a pedestrian, that is going to cost us way more than $3,000, right? But the other point is our response time for our emergency personnel from the fire department are dependent. That extra few minutes could save a life going that they would have to go around.
I don't dispute that, but we did have the bridge closed for a considerable amount of time. And we managed fine. So,
And we manage complaints at DPW on a daily basis the entire time.
Right.
Lanny, I completely disagree. This $3,000 to me at a 9-to-1 match seems like a no-brainer. I think we should just vote for this. It's infrastructure. I mean, that bridge is heavily used throughout the day. Yes, there are other ways around it. It doesn't seem to make any sense that we would run the risk of liability or having to reroute everybody or what is pretty nominal cost. I mean, frankly, it's the public well knows, I have voted against a number of things that I think were frivolous expenditures. I do not think this is one. So I'm in support of this and strongly so.
The questions for Chris.
I'm prepared to make a motion.
Al?
Mr. Chair, I move that the board approve the chair or vice chair to sign the structures grant agreement to receive $27,000 and utilize $3,000 from GL number 10 313-318-000 bridge maintenance to cover the cost and to authorize Jeremy Delisle to award and sign a contract with Daniels Construction.
I'll second it.
We have a second from Rocket. Any
Too late.
discussion? Are Dan and Kim on? Just before we vote.
Aye. Aye.
Okay, all right.
They're excited.
Did you hear the motion? Can see what they did.
Yes, I'm seeing thumbs up.
Okay, all right, all those in favor say aye. Opposed? Okay, looks like it's unanimous unless you abstain. Oh, you're still.
I'm still working, yeah, I'm still working it up. I'm gonna vote no on this. I think we could do with a bridge closed for you.
Okay, six in favor, 1 opposed. Thank you, Chris. The next item is the Quechee box culvert purchase. Maybe you again.
All right.
All right.
So the Quechee box culvert, that is a long running one that's been delayed for COVID, for the Balloon Festival, to have the businesses out there for easements. Most recently, the supply chain has been a big issue for us. We have talked about pre-purchasing pieces and parts for projects. This was one that was well suited for that. So we did put out a bid process to solicit the precast concrete box culvert wind walls and head walls. This tells you about the supply chain. We directly contacted every precast manufacturer within reasonable time frame from New Jersey onward. We got one response. So we did some extra due diligence on this response with our engineers to do reference checks, background checks on their installs, other jobs. It all came back very favorable, including my reach outs. They're well known outside of this area, and quality of work seems to be adequate. So it is our recommendation under these conditions to avoid a further delay. We do execute this bid and accept it. We will be back to get an amendment to the engineering because of the time frame that's passed, to have their contract extended to get the construction oversight and all done as well. That's for another meeting. We're still working on that.
Questions for Chris about this one? Ray?
I'd like to make a motion.
Okay,
We approve the acting town manager to utilize $198,527 of funds currently dedicated to the project under purchase order number 6734 for the direct purchase of the box culvert, head walls and wing walls to be installed by other contracts through a separate RFP process.
I'll second the motion.
second from Mary, any discussion? Right,
Yeah, I think this one is definitely a no-brainer because of the difficulty to reroute traffic around this. So I will definitely support this.
thank you. Any other comments?
It sounds like someone lives in Quechee.
I don't live in an area where I'm going to cross either one of these.
This is great. I appreciate that you guys have made the effort. I know it's difficult times. I'm glad we're moving forward on this. So,
Great, I agree with Lanny. This is an important one. So we have a second from Mary. So all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay.
Aye.
Unanimous.
there we go.
Okay. So now we're going into our budget reviews. So we're going to talk about the health officer first, but then we're going to talk about capital improvement and then ARPA. We've got all the department heads here, so they can act as a resource to us. I believe we wanted to hear about the health officer because generally every year we're a little shocked at how little
He just barely pulled in.
he just barely pulled in.
Yes.
Okay, we'll just give him a minute to come in.
May I make a brief select board member statement, community statement while we wait?
We're not,
I think he's right here.
yeah, we're not, I mean, we did.
So sorry. You said.
Don't worry about it. No, we're moving right along. So glad you got here. So Brett, we're doing the budget reviews and the health officer position came up, and whenever we see that, we're always a little surprised at how little the compensation is. So we wanted to talk to you, and if you could just remind us again where you get funding from, how much it is, things like that. That'd be great.
So town health officers are, because I just got the whole spiel from the state, what it exactly is. Town health officers are one of those old situations where each town sends a person's name to the commissioner of health, and then the commissioner appoints them as an official town health officer for that town of Hartford. They are not state employees, but the state of Vermont, under mandate, takes care of any litigation for that town health officer or health officers in the line of duty. I asked the question recently to the state's attorney that works at the health department, and the courts have ruled that town health officers are these quasi-state town people, and that the courts see them as town employees, quote unquote. Now, some towns they are employees, other towns they're like myself, they're health officers, and the town gives them a stipend or whatever it is. So the stipend comes only from the town of Hartford. In this case, the state picks up any legal fees.
And what is the stipend currently? Just sorry.
Last year it was raised from, it had been 2,000 for quite a few years. That came up maybe 4 or 5 years ago, from 1,000. And they raised it, I believe.
Yeah, you went
Five-
to
five-
1,500 and then 5,000.
5,000,
Right.
yeah. And One of my main concerns is my deputy health officer. So as you probably notice in your updated reports that you get, we try to go out, especially in inspections, to have always more than one person there. Some inspections are, easy and just one person, but we try to always have two people there at the inspection. So the deputy health officer accompanies me on those. And when I'm traveling, doing stuff, I do the paperwork. I take the calls still, even when I'm overseas. But the deputy goes out and does the eyes, and usually he'll be accompanied by the fire marshal, or now possibly the deputy fire marshal, or the police social worker who's involved in many of our cases. So health officers are broad. They do two things. They do all issues around public health. That's a pretty broad situation, from the wellness of a homeless person per se, and that's in need. And we of course try to get them to call 211 or whatever they needed, up to working with families or individuals who may be in a dire situation, in a public health situation, of helping, getting them the right places to apply for food, lodging, so on and so forth, which under rental codes, the state, that's the one program that is still staying, is the emergency homeless. Now those are people who are housed, but because of an emergency of some sort, they become homeless. So the state still has vouchers if they can find them lodging for that. So we're involved in those situations. We work, as you probably see, closely with the police social worker. And because right now the health rental codes, some of them coincide with the life safety issues that the fire department and fire marshal oversees. So we try to do those together so that the expert, who is the fire marshal, will make suggestions on what we need to do in the duties of the health officer. The state, the governor did sign into law the end of last January, February 1st, it's coming up in a year. The new law will at some point move the health department rental codes to the Department of Public Safety.
Mhm.
And the reason being mainly is they're working on if the codes need to be updated, but health officers will be parity officers with the Department of Public Safety. They'll probably be, in our type of town, will be the eyes and the investigation, and they will take care of those situations where they have a legal or a fine or anything. It will go through the Department of Public Safety. So we'll do the report, send it to them, and they will do the rest. But the update right now is we're probably still 6 months to a year out. We'd like to see it happen right away, but we're still quite a ways out for that transfer. So right now, the health department is still doing the full job of that. And I think that's pretty much the update that I gave you. Caseload, as you saw, is good. It's one of the things that I just want to put out, and I've spoken to select board members before, is that it is a full part-time job. Now, part-time meaning we're on call. I'm on call 24/7. I in a public health emergency. But one day we could have nothing. We could. It doesn't happen often, or one or two things, and then the next day we put 10 hours in. It just it really varies case to case. The average, I wish I could get an average for each inspection. You know, an inspection itself takes around 1 hour of actual hands-on usually. But that could fall, you know, the paperwork, follow-up, everything can take, you know, 20, we put in one case recently, put way over 100 to 150 hours in the case. It was an unusual one, highly unusual. It was a gentleman who had nobody else to help him or do anything, and so we stepped up to do that. But that's pretty much how it goes. And I think in the future, working with our Department of Public Safety, there probably needs to be an integration at some point. I may not be around, but at some point, health officers aren't going away. We've asked, and the state has no intention to not have them. So they probably will integrate more and more. Small towns will, small populations, and where they may do 5-10 cases a year, those will be taken over. The health officer will be there, but they'll be taken over by a state inspector coming through the Department of Public Safety. The big towns won't do that.
Do you have thoughts on the amount that's generally allocated to you?
Well,
Or you have a
you know,
request for more?
I'm, you know, like I said, we both took this on. This is going into my 14 of almost 15 years. So I took it on as a public service, and it was a lot different back then, but it's always been a public service. But it is, you know, it does help that, you know, anything the town gives can be useful. But my big concern is at least getting you know, $1,000 or so to the deputy health officer to cover his gas and auto expense. He doesn't, you know, he's not also looking for this as a job, but you know, it would be nice that if we could cover that cost, that would be.
So 1,000 for the deputy health officer.
It's up to you,
Expenses
yeah.
request.
but I would like to add that deputy health officer subline, you know, so it goes directly to him.
Okay. Good questions for Brett? Alex?
Kim has her hand up.
Oh, Kim?
Hey there, can you hear me?
Yep.
Great. Thanks, Brett. I think I've heard you tell us about this position at least 3 or 4 times now, and it still baffles me. I'm wondering if, like, it sounds like it's a bigger job than it once was for our town as well as for others. But this is a model across the whole state, like comparable towns to our size have a similar setup. Is that correct?
No, most of the towns so we're very unusual. We have one of the high rental facilities, units in the state, partly because it's a central designation, and then we have Quechee Lakes. So a town with our rental unit capacity, those are all full-time. I mean, they're full-time employees for you know, Rutland, Burlington, Essex, Brattleboro. Those people are, you know, directly embedded in their town. They still hold that. Now, the other thing that is unusual about this, and didn't always know this, but town health officers have to be citizens of the town they're appointed in, or they were thinking of regionalizing. They're probably not going to do that now because they've hired, the state has hired 5 regional people, but they under that, you can't hire an outside town health officer. I don't know why, but it's one of those things. They have to be citizens of the town that they are serving in. So
Can I?
Yeah.
Follow up. So I'm trying to think about and maybe Gail can answer this, but is it comparable maybe to what we think about when we're compensating the treasurer? And is it, so it's an appointed position. It's not necessarily a full employment position, but is it something that we could compare to like how much the town treasurer is paid for their time and efforts? Anyone?
The treasurer is actually an elected
Yes,
position,
yes,
not an
yeah.
appointed position.
Yeah, I don't know if you heard that, Kim, the treasurer is elected. We have currently an appointed town treasurer.
Okay. Yeah, well, in any case, I support funding for the deputy health officer and any increase that might seem reasonable to the board for the health officer as well.
Great,
Thanks.
thank you. Yeah,
Kim, you had also asked if Brett had felt that there was sufficient funding for any type of resources that he may need throughout the community.
Right, I had asked if there, if the health officer thought some sort of stipend for expenses that come up through their work would be useful. So I guess, Brett, do you have any thoughts about that?
The state, the education, and which both the deputy and I keep up on quite well over the years, is free. So that doesn't cost us. In my position, I'm as a public health servant, I'm highly involved in the Upper Valley community with that. So I get not financial resources, but I get other types of resources through, I'm just been appointed chair of the Public Health Council in Upper Valley. And there are, paper and all that kind of stuff I have. And then I'm on the board of the Medical Reserve Corp of the Upper Valley, and I get a lot of those kind of supplies that we keep in the car for emergencies for people and stuff like that. So, we're not, like I said, I think the hard look is to realize it is public health is now part of public safety. It's public health and safety, or public safety and health around the country. And I think that's, the future, it has to go that direction. So I'd rather the board look towards the future. And, I've been doing a long time, so I'm well supplied, and, we know what we need. And so we don't need anything there. I noticed we have a nice sign now that in our office area that says health officer, and that's working fine. The cell phones for both of us are personal, which is fine. We do, the one phone that the town does pay for is a line, I guess, not a cell phone, but an actual line. So, and that's important, I think, for those people that don't have cell phones, that they can call in and leave messages.
sure. So, board, do we have any consensus on $1,000 to help
Just have a
defray the land?
question. With the move to move the health officer to the public safety department, can public safety speak as far as what we're looking forward to in terms of what our time frame is to move the health officer there, and what sort of impact that will have on the budget?
Well, I think it's a thought more than waiting for this new law to take effect. When that takes effect, we'll know better who's doing what, and everything else. So I think and it could happen in 3 months, could happen by this summer. The attorneys on both sides are working on it to make it take effect. The commissioner of public health simply has to sign on the dotted line, and then that date is when it takes effect. So I think that would probably behoove everybody to wait to see that. What money, because the town will get some funding through ticketing. I don't want to say that's our job, because it's not at all. But when the state does collect funds, there is in the state law, there's something built in there around distribution and coming back to the local town. So actually, Chief Cooney would actually be the local authority that I would say, I'm sending this report off to the state.
I'd like to know what sort of impact this will have though upon our public safety department in terms of cost and whether that's been taken into account for.
I don't think they know yet.
Well,
No,
no,
if it's gonna happen within the year, I'm sure Scott's
so.
done some thoughts on it. I'd like to hear from our,
Yeah, so
Or fire
that's a
chief.
good question, that's why health officers won't go away in any town, even in, Burlington, well, they're part of the employment, but because they'll be doing all that work for whatever you decide. And it won't put any burden on to a department. There'll be their only thing is they may gain some funds from the tickets that would go out.
Okay, thank you, Brett. I think we're getting really far ahead of
Yeah.
ourselves, but if Scott does have a comment.
Yeah,
any comment, but we have a request for $1,000, and I think we should decide on that. We have a lot to do this evening. Dan has his hand up.
Yeah, I just want to thank Brett for his almost 15 years of service. And I want us all to be aware as we budget for the future that he is giving the town a steal of a deal. So as we plan for future years, I want us to keep on the radar that the cost of having someone in this position would probably drastically increase both for him and the person who's underneath him. So just to keep that on the radar for future years.
Thank you, Dan. Scott, if you wanted to comment or you have any comments, that would be great quickly.
So we did hear about this change when the legislature passed it. It's Act 181, if you want to look it up. But what it does is give concurrent authority to the Department of Public Safety and directs the Commissioner of Public Safety to adopt new rules so that basically the Fire Marshal's office gets the same authority as the health officers did in enforcing the health code. I think when the act was initially accepted, it gave concurrent authority immediately for fire safety to enforce the rental housing code that health uses. But it's all still, everything's still in draft. We have not seen any rules come out of public safety, but I am meeting with them frequently, and this is on the docket for new rules that are coming.
Great. Well, I'm sure we'll hear a lot more about that. Does the board have any thoughts on the request for $1,000 for the deputy health officer? Rocket?
It makes sense.
Ally?
I definitely would be supportive of that. And then, I also wonder if, it sounds like you're both doing a lot of work between you and the deputy health officer, if we would consider more than that. I'm thinking like, would we consider 5,000 for the deputy health officer and even something closer to 10 or 15 for the public health officer? Rocket's giving me a look. But that it's an astronomical amount of work for, and I know that you've been so committed in approaching it from a place of public service, but I know we won't always have you. And this needs to be sustainable. It's really important. So I would put that out there too.
Lanny?
Yeah, follow up on what Ally's saying. That's one of the reasons why I was trying to get a sense from the public safety as far as whether there's a plan in place with the money in place as well to take care of this when it does roll over. And in order to make sure that we compensate the health officer and the deputy health officer accordingly, but for how long of a period of time? That would be my question.
Rocket, and I think we just need to decide if we're going to proceed with this request for $1,000.
I hear both of your comments. I think that given that we have the all-star team here tonight, department heads and all, I think in no department are we looking to allocate more than has been requested. If anything, it's going to end up being a little bit less. And Brett, I thank you for your service. I think it would be judicious to allocate $1,000 that's been requested.
I'll second the motion.
And we don't really have a formal motion, but do we have 4 of us? We'll show of hands who would support 1,000. Yeah, everybody except for Lanny.
There still has to be discussion though.
What's that?
It's on, it's
Still has
not
to be discussion.
formal vote. It's just
Yeah, no, this is just an informal. Can we add that $1,000?
straw poll.
Great.
But you call the motion. That means a vote.
I didn't call for a motion. I think I said if we could just get a sense of where
I
everyone
might have
was.
said the word
You
motion.
might
but it
have
wasn't
said
a formal
motion.
motion.
All right, thanks very much, Brett.
Thank you, Brett.
All right, now we'll go to the capital improvement plans. We've got, everyone should have received some memos from the department heads. Our plan tonight is to review these and decide which items we want to fund and how we're going to end up funding them. I don't know, Gail, if you have any thoughts of how we should start, like in order of people, or if the board just wants to pick one up and discuss it.
Sure. So as Mike said, everybody should have a copy of the board packet, your first packet, the CIP. And all of the projects that are listed on there either have recommended funding sources or they need to have funding sources. Going along with that, in your operating budget that you have at the end of your operating budget, the series 921, those include reserve deposits and or funding projects. So those are also included in your CIP project list. Again, there are some projects that do not have a funding source that either need to be identified to be self-funded or have a discussion later on about a different funding source that goes along with them. I am hopeful that you all took the time to look at the information because a lot of the CIP projects that are listed in the first packet are also included in the ARPA packet, which is in the second. So they go together. And if you choose to use ARPA funding to fund some of the CIP funding, CIP projects, that will reduce the overall operating budget, the general fund part of it. So again, we have all of the department heads who have CIP items that are here. And we certainly can, if you have questions, we'd rather not just stand up there and talk for hours if you have specific questions on specific projects.
Mike
Great.
has her hand up.
Ellie, yep, Kim?
Yeah, I think as I expressed, I had a real hard time digesting this in this format that is a little, it was unwieldy for me to, particularly without the ability to kind of print it all out. And so I'm not going to have too much input at the moment, but one thing that I feel is not represented, unless I missed it, is the transfer station and the solid waste facility. Like I'm not seeing anything in the requests unless I'm missing, and I guess I would like to know to start where that might fit into everything.
So in the budget packet, it is actually listed on budget discussion open items. It's listed as
Right.
solid waste sustainability, correct? There's not any funding, there's no funding identified that goes along with it. I think the board needs to make a decision what they would like to do with that facility. And that would include either doing another study to determine if they want to keep it open and what it's going to cost, or look at options to have it leased out.
And when can we do that? I mean, I've been in favor of looking at options to close it out based on previous reports. So I guess.
So
Anyway.
this is your opportunity to do it right now. If you would like to set aside funding, and it would come out of the enterprise fund, Fund 30, to pay for that. And then we know any enterprise fund that ends up having a loss will be covered by the operating fund.
Right. So I guess maybe not to skip ahead to ARPA, but I will just put this out there and we can continue the discussion. But like beyond the top priority recommendations, which are about $1.9 million, that would leave about $1,075,000 for leftover of ARPA funds. And so I'd like us to consider earmarking that for that we have to deal with the transfer station. I feel. Anyway, I know there are a lot of needs, but that is one that is a priority that I think hasn't been addressed fully by this board or any board in the last 10 or more years. So I'll just leave it there for the moment. And my apologies for just not being able to sort of like game this all out and look at it to have like a real healthy, I mean, at this moment, I'm inclined to just kind of take staff's recommendations. But then we still need to determine. Okay, I'm just gonna leave it there and hear what the rest of the board has to say. Thanks.
Okay.
I can definitely appreciate, Kim, that it is a lot of information. It's a lot of projects. One thing to keep in mind is we're going to be doing this again. If we do it properly, we'll be doing this again in January. So in 6 months, we're going to start doing this all over again. And if we can have a better process in place and look at different CIP programs or setups that go along with it, we're going to be back right into the 25 budget right off. And so I just would remind everybody of that. I know that this is not the perfect scenario, probably more like the perfect storm for us to deal with, but I think that we have a good plan in place, and I think it will execute a lot of projects that we have. And I know that solid waste is definitely a hot button, and it needs to be discussed, and this is the opportunity. You do have representatives from DPW that are here that can speak about solid waste. Certainly not in-depth in-depth questions. They can answer what they know, and then they could come back on Thursday night if there's additional information that's needed.
Okay, that's actually really reassuring, because I was feeling like we got this on Thursday or Friday or whenever it was, and that we had to lock down the whole CIP tonight. So if it's not quite as permanently fixed as that, that's reassuring for me. And I don't know if the rest of the board, I have also shared with the chair and the vice chair and acting town manager that there's a specific city that has a capital improvement plan policy, as well as a practice for rating and prioritizing capital improvement projects that I would love us to look at as a model for implementing for Hartford. And probably that's something that would make sense once we have a permanent town manager. But so that would be my goal going forward with this. Thanks.
Thanks, Kim. We won't just start with like DPW and go review their plan and just go from there if people have any thoughts.
Well, are there specific questions on projects?
Yeah, are there specific questions?
Because we're going to be here all night if they go line by line.
Well, that's true. That is true.
I had a couple questions. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the first is, this is for planning and development. So Lori, the project number 2, that sidewalk from Sykes Mountain to Ballard Ball Drive. It says in the estimated cost, or sorry, in the funding streams targeted, that there seems to be a 2014 V-Trans grant with a local match, and we have $34,000. And then it says a town match of $80,000. So is what needs to be funded by the town $7,000 or $87,000?
So there's two.
Lord.
There are 2 items for that. There is the existing loan that we do have. And that is $7,000 short for the match that we're required. In addition to that, there is for going for the second one, we would also have matching funds. And so the total of it would be $87,000.
I see. So there's 2 different grants.
Right.
Which we need.
We just have to make sure we meet the obligations for that.
Okay. And then a follow-up for you is obviously there's so many needs in this town. One of the things that I was thinking about, especially when it comes to sidewalks, is, I mean, my instinct is that some of the water issues need to be addressed, because this is really a health and safety, for me, a fundamental pillar of life. Sidewalks for me, oftentimes I think some of these could wait. However, I found myself wondering with some of these sidewalks, is there a way to equalize in terms of how many pedestrians use it, how long it is, what the relative value of each sidewalk project is? How do
So,
we think about that?
well, there's a couple of different ways to approach that. Several years ago, we did a bike ped study, which looked at the town across all the way around. And we came up with a prioritization of projects based on that. And then we've been systematically trying to build them out. Now, within that, that's a conceptual, and things do change over time. But I think the plan there's two premises of it. They looked at safety factors and use. And then the other thing is wanting to recognize that each village has their core area, and is their core area being adequately served for pedestrians, knowing that that's where your highest activity tends to go. But so there is a way to look at that. Unfortunately, because everything always costs so much, we've had to break things up into pieces. So one of the things that we did in order to obtain funding, we're finishing out the whole Ballard Vale Drive, Sykes Mountain Avenue, Route 5 section. And that is a 20-year, actually it probably goes back to over 26 years, because I've been here for 26 years and we've been working on it incrementally. So that's definitely our number one priority. It's high traffic area. It's a high area with use for residential and commercial, and we want to make sure that in this high traffic area we've met those obligations. And we're working very closely with the state in terms of any paving projects that they're doing and trying to integrate that very closely. So that clearly is our number one priority. And then we started looking down, and you can see where I prioritized different ones where, we've done scoping projects. That's required by the state for us to do that in order for us to be eligible to even apply for state transportation funds. Those reports came out with studies that looked at each of the different villages that we've done, Quechee, Wilder, West Hartford, and looked at the areas in which are the highest traffic areas. I tried to adhere to highlight that. So for example, West Hartford Bridge, that's ones that is very clearly one where for a very little cost, we can have a big bang for the dollar, getting people safely over that bridge that currently has very narrow shoulders. So that's one thing to look at. So it's not only what is an urgent need or safety, but how can we most effectively use our dollars, knowing that we have this much that needs to be done, and we have this amount of money each year, and to start to program it out. And you will see in many of the recommendations where I talked about putting things in reserve, it's really building it up over time so that by the time we get to that point of it being a priority, we've put some money aside.
Sure.
Unfortunately, we haven't had those reserves attended to in many years, so everything keeps getting pushed out. I know, and we do want to get back to an update of our bike ped plan sometime in the next couple of years, but we still have those high priority projects that we have to knock off.
A question I have for you, Lori, is with these matching grants, and I'm looking really at the top two here, Route 5 priorities, where there V-Trans matching grants, or I guess the top one is federal grants. Is there an expiration date for that, or are we at risk for losing that match? If
once we're in the cycle, we have been very successful in being able to get additional funds over and above what we had anticipated because of increased in cost. And every time we do that, it actually adds on for the life of the loan. And then we get amendments to that for the life of it. If we are actively in a project and we are actively working on it and it's just not sitting there because we haven't gotten to it, the state would raise a question, but in my tenure here, we've never done that except for one where we personally backed out of it and said it's no longer a priority.
So these two Route 5 projects are in process, and we're not at
absolutely
we're not at any risk of losing.
And you can see that part of it is the state has to make some decisions about what they're going to do, and then we're on hold until they can make decisions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I have questions for another. Thank you, Lori. I have questions for.
Can I just make one comment though?
Oh, yeah.
On that one project that Lori spoke about, the Willard Road to the covered bridge, that has the 260,000 for the town match. That is a recommended project for the ARPA. If you choose not to fund it through ARPA, there is an $87,000 annual deposit that is not currently included in the budget to be considered.
That's the Ballard Vale Sykes Ave. Is that?
That's
Willard Road to the covered bridge.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Lynn.
is this page, is this what you're recommending, the staff recommendations, correct?
That
Yeah,
is
there's-
for the ARPA funding.
Okay, so
That should be- Yep.
all right. I didn't see anything on there for the DPW, so that's why I was wondering.
It's on page 1. That's all yellow.
Okay, on that one, okay.
Right, so that's the ARPA.
There's a lot of documents here, so.
Well, I put it in order exactly the way that the agenda was put together.
I got
So,
that.
Rocket, who's the next person?
Department of Public Works.
So depending on what you want to talk about, and maybe Chris
the-
or maybe-
Really, these Fund 50, Fund 55, Gate Street, the water mains. Hey, Jerry.
So you're talking strictly the water main on Gate Street?
Yeah, so that one, and then this Quechee, I was really just looking at all of these items here that are marked very high priority and feeling the heat of that, which I'm sure you're feeling as well. And so,
Rocket, can you just tell us which page you're on so we can follow with you?
yeah, so I'm on the DPW CIP Capital Improvement Plan.
And what page?
Page 1 of 4.
Okay,
So this estimated cost of $400,000, is this part of the ongoing Fairview Terrace engineering study? Is it something that can be done simultaneously with that?
This is strictly removing the water line from the hill and putting it up on Fairview Terrace and coming back in. So with the hill moving and everything, this is more of a life safety issue. And if that hill continues to shift and that water main decides to let go, I don't know if you ever remember Ravenswood Terrace up in Wilder, but it takes the entire road right into your downtown village and would be catastrophic cleanup. But
Oh,
so
because
this
the water.
100,000 would remove and replace that water line.
Interesting. And so, but that construction project would not be able to be undertaken simultaneously with the reconstruction of that road there.
No, this would actually start this physical year 24 versus we're in the engineering portion of the hill itself.
Right. But my question is, if the water main holds out and then we end up redoing that road, Gate Street reopening.
You spend the same amount of money to have the water line
Regardless.
put back up that hill.
I see. I mean, just comment to the board, it just seems like, I mean, I know some of these other projects, especially from other departments, are important, but it seems like Jeremy said, a health and safety issue, but also, I mean, if you think about water and access to water as a human right, it seems like a very important thing that we need to address some of these infrastructure projects. And I don't know, are there opportunities for matching grants for these? Is there a way to leverage town local funds?
so many of the projects that are, so the priority ones that you're speaking about, the ones that are on page 1.
Yeah.
They're either being recommended for ARPA funding.
Mhm.
They have matching grant funds already, and have reserves. So the best part about self-funding them, the ones that are new, is that we do save 20% by not going outside to have a different funding source.
What's that 20%? Just interest?
So Chris, do you want to speak about that?
Yeah, so like on this one, not mentioned is the Fairview Extension water main is one of our oldest water mains and it needs to be replaced anyway. Beyond that, so when you go out to a state revolving fund loan, there are many requirements on top of the normal requirements just for bonding. It affects every level of the project, starting with engineering. There's many steps they have to do with engineering as a federal regulations that they don't have to do otherwise. And it's pushing paper. And that pushing paper extends right through the borrowing process. So that you got an easy 10% there. There is, while SRF loans are low with interest or no interest, they have processing fees that equate to interest. On top of that, SRF loans are always buy America first. That drives up the cost for many products we can't get. And then if we prove we can't get them, there is a long, arduous process to get permission to use the not made in America parts. All of that drives up costs. And then, of course, if you bond, there's interest. So anytime you can do a long-term capital plan, self-funded without a bond or an SRF, you're automatically saving money. And with construction costs going up so fast, we can't keep these prices up to date. It's very important.
So it's really a blend of interest, but mostly administrative costs, time delay. Okay, thank you. It's tough for me to think through this because obviously the list of these estimated costs runs well into the millions. Do you have comments on how we would think through this, given our circumstances. And also, is there a way for us, I mean, Gail, you would know which we're already setting aside funds for on a reserve account, if any?
Right, so in your packet.
Yeah.
There's a column that says funding streams targeted. So it's the
Yes,
second column in,
right.
and so that will lay out for you whether or not there are reserves, there's a grant, it's already currently in the operating budget being funded, or for ARPA funding.
So if no reserves are mentioned, there is nothing earmarked or saved away for that. Like
Correct.
in the case of this top one.
For the first one, that is correct. The second one for Fund 55, you'll see there's $493,737 that would pay
Right.
for that out of reserves.
So what is our town's contingency plan if we don't fund this?
We would end up having to work with finance and come up with a plan to do that.
So it's gonna happen regardless, basically.
Most for sure.
Right, there's not sufficient funding currently in that fund to make this repair. And if something does happen, the general fund would be responsible for covering it.
Wow. Mm, that's bleak.
Honest.
Hmm.
Honest.
Sure, yeah, I mean,
More questions, Rocket?
probably, but I'm happy to see.
Kim has her hand up again.
Kit?
Yeah, just a kind of general for, I think, Jeremy or Lori, is the Bridge Street sidewalk replacement already funded? Like, is that already in the works already, or is it not on this plan?
So on there, we have the bridge maintenance and capital improvement plan. Part of that engineering will hopefully take care of engineering. We're not prepared to fix that sidewalk. I think I've told the board before that sidewalk is full of telecommunications and other conduits. So you can't just chip away at it. It's actually part of the structure, and it's a very important communications line with 911 and everything else. So they will actually have to do sonar on it to figure out where the conduits are, because there is no actual record drawn of how it was constructed. So until we get to that point, we can't estimate the cost or be prepared for it. But in our budgets going forward, we have asked for a budget to address that plan.
Okay, so like, there are reserve funds sort of earmarked for when that piece is ready?
We're asking in our budget for an ongoing sidewalk and bridge maintenance reserve budget.
Yeah.
Or a budget, but we don't use lots for reserves to address these issues, but we don't have the last plan for all these bridges, which I consider that sidewalk part of the structure, it's part of the bridge. The last plan for all our bridges was done in 2011. That was prior to Irene. It's severely out of date with most of our plans. So what needs to be done is not accurate.
So page 1 of this, their CIP, the last item on it is the 50,000 that Chris is speaking about.
Right.
And whether it gets funded from ARPA or it gets funded from reserves, that is something that needs to be executed. And in order to move forward to determine what bridges and what sidewalks, what the priority list is, the bridge maintenance capital plan or needs to be needs to be done.
Got it. Thank you.
Other questions, people?
Next.
DPW? Lynn?
I just wondering if we're thinking out loud here, just wondering if we're attacking this in the wrong way. I realize CIP, but I'm wondering if the discussion of ARPA shouldn't come first. To see whether we can knock some of these out of the ballpark with ARPA funds.
Again, if you look at.
I know I saw
paperwork,
that.
all of them have it listed on there, either what we're recommending for funding, which could be either currently with reserves out of operating or out of ARPA. So if
I
you'd
see
like
that.
to jump to the ARPA, you'll see that many of these projects
Yeah, I think we should just,
have.
I think we should jump into the
recommended
ARPA and then
from ARPA.
what's left over, look at CIP.
Doesn't it make sense to just all have it as one blended conversation, and as we sort of prioritize projects and then figure out what those amounts would be and how we would go about paying for it.
I will just note that Gail had us set up, our top 3 or 4 projects are all involved ARPA. So it's been prioritized for you.
Yeah.
So the beginning conversation of the plan is ARPA.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel.
ARPA then, folks?
Yeah, I don't think we need to reinvent it. Gail's got this pretty well squared away. Follow her lead
Is
on
that an
this.
agreement from the entire board? Because if that's the case, then you can pick up your packet number 1. And just move to packet 2 that starts with all the highlighted yellow. And then
That makes
summary
sense.
page.
It might focus us a little more. I mean, the real question at some point in place, what do we want to spend our on and how much?
That's where I see is it's better direction to head for.
Jim, do you have any?
Yeah, I mean, for lack of a better suggestion, I don't feel like I've properly been able to prioritize this with what I have. So I'm gonna just kind of follow the lead of you and the rest of the board on this. Yeah, I don't have anything better to offer.
So before we move away from the CIP though, the fire department had a specific item that does not have a funding source at the moment, does not require a funding source at the moment. So I'd like to give Scott the opportunity to speak regarding his item that he had.
Sure, come on up, Scott.
I don't know where it's made it in the pack, but I can.
It's in the CIP packet. And it is the 3rd paperclip down. And it starts with CIP reserve and station 2 project.
And I think specifically Gail's referring me to the MS to the Station 2 renovation of storage building subject we've had a few times.
Yep.
So within that packet that you have in front of you is a conceptual plan to do those projects. It was done back in 21. Those are old numbers, so they're definitely not current and do not reflect the current market for construction. And I think we better understand our needs after running the station now effectively for about 2 years now, and now full time starting in January. I think we have a better understanding of what those needs are for those kind of projects. So the ask is authorization from the board to allow me to go through the RFP process and solicit to contractors, designers, architects, and vendors to give us some real numbers that I can come back to the boards with, and then we can work to find out what the best funding opportunities are for that type of project.
Okay,
So that's-
the original estimate was 1.16. Okay, and then, but this would just allow you basically to go out and get some updated numbers so that
Correct.
we
And
can
then-
at some point figure out the true cost and how we would finance it.
Correct. So come get the real numbers for you and then bring you back with some funding options. So what those designs and plans look like.
Okay, so anyone have any objection to?
But what
to
do
doing
you,
that?
I mean, do we need a motion from the board or something to move ahead with this, or what's required to carry this out? I think it's a good plan, but do we need a motion
I
for
think
that?
a motion would be.
Yeah, a motion would be fine. I'm willing to accept one.
Pretty
So-
simple, giving Scott the authority to see.
Yeah, okay, so I make the motion that we allow the fire chief to move ahead with getting a RFP process started for Station 2 renovations.
I second that.
Maybe a second from
That work?
Rocket. Any discussion of that before we go? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Yeah, Dan. Okay, so that'll be unanimous to start the RFP. Thanks, Scott.
So so this one's over, we can put that one aside, right?
Yeah, keep them in order the way that I gave them to you, though.
Oh,
Yeah.
Come on now. Yeah.
Yes, like, please.
Yeah, that can last all
Yeah.
that long. That's okay. We've got all the documents here. All right, so we're gonna ARPA instead, right? Because I think that'll help sort of clarify this stuff for us.
Should have said that to start with. You should have said that to start with, Gail. Come on now.
Adults, I figured you probably could handle that. Come on, man.
There's a lot of stuff.
All right, so I'm looking at the DPW ARPA request. Do we want to start there? It looks like these were like very high priority projects. I think Chris told us about, some of these already. So it looks like on some of these, right, like the first one's an ARPA request, the other, I think one of the others at least sort of breaks it out some more. With money from reserves and impact fees, and then we do have the question of the Fund 10 bridge maintenance and CIP contracted services, whether that's ARPA or reserves.
So the other item to note that's really important for these DPW projects that are listed here.
Yep.
If the board agreed to move forward with the way that it's laid out here, this would also achieve bringing the paving reserve up to 775,000. The way that it was the original budget proposal that was put together had it at 500,000. DPW has made the request for multiple years that they would like to have $1 million. So by moving forward with the way it's laid out here, we could achieve a reserve of 775,000. We already have 500,000 currently already in the reserve account. But by moving funding around would achieve another 225,000.
So by using ARPA, we can add to that'll free up money that can go into the paving.
Funding that's currently already in the budget.
Okay.
That would be funding projects. And so at the end, if you choose not to do the projects that are listed here, utilizing ARPA funding, DPW will still end up with $500,000 for reserve. So that's important to remember as well.
That's good to know. So it looks like these projects identified are all health and safety priorities, and some of them are one, at least is listed as shovel ready, engineering is done. So it seems like these are ones where you'd be able to start up fairly quickly.
Since it was first developed shovel ready.
Okay,
Mhm.
great.
I
Alex?
just had a question about the total. So I'm looking at the highlighted public works and the ARPA. And it says that the total for those is about 1.7 million.
No, the 1.7 million is what's left.
What's
after.
left? There we go. Thanks.
So 1.7 million in ARPA after, if we were to.
Execute the
ARPA.
DPW projects that are listed there.
Got
And
it.
just to remind all of you, the number one goal of having ARPA funding is to repair and invest in your infrastructure that you have. And I think that we've heard from the residents on many levels, and including our staff, that we have some projects that need to get done.
Good. Understood. Rocket?
How does that 1.7 balance? So that would be $1 million right here, but I'm adding up 1,200, 14.5.
Maybe I did my math wrong.
Well, that was my question, because all of these added up is about 1.375.
Right.
And then I think Gail is saying this is what we have left for the rest.
Well, if the balance is 2.7 and we end up with 1.7, it's a difference of 1 million. So there's 300,000 there. It's not adding up. It could be that last item didn't get scooped in.
It very well
The
could
Hartford
be.
water.
Okay.
Question for DPW, if we were to approve, let's just say all of this, is there the ability, the capacity within your department and within the contractors that we have available to us to execute on this in a timely manner?
So I can't speak on the contractors, as they seem to be running the same predicament as the rest of us, and it's getting harder and harder to get them, but your first three are shovel ready. And as far as just need to get bids, and I'll let Chris kind of correct me if I'm wrong, as far as the water line on Fairview, the contractor. As far as the Quechee water main, same thing, need to put it out, get a bid.
It's gonna come down to supply chain. The contractors aren't gonna respond after they come up empty. It's us.
Well, my question about this, my concern is that if we earmark this funding for your department for these projects, and then because of supply chain or labor supply or whatever it is, it's not able to be executed on for another year and the costs go up 20%. What do we do?
That's something we can control.
Sure.
What I think is you have adaptability in your ARPA plan. So if we tell you that unfortunately this project is delayed because of conditions beyond our control, the manufacturing process, et cetera,
Sure.
you have backup projects. Really identify that. So, and
Okay, so would it be good to put a horizon, like an execution horizon on them? If we earmarked for DPW, or is there a certain amount that we should set in reserve, a 10% buffer in case for costs, or has that already been factored in? I mean, 400,000 is a pretty round number for both projects,
Well, that's
so,
numbers provided by the engineers, but again, those are engineers' estimates.
Yeah.
The marketplace, this is a new spring, we're gonna find out a lot more when these things go out to bid.
gotcha. So given this information, I think it's smart for us to maybe set aside a certain amount within ARPA for any projects that we do fund, given the market being volatile as it is. I mean, I'm supportive of it. It's hard to say no to any of these projects because you say, well, you know, we don't want to set ourselves up. I feel like we've done a great job in this community, well, nationwide, of kicking the can down the road on infrastructure maintenance.
So all our infrastructure's been kicked down.
Yeah.
Even the engineering to get it underway has been kicked down
Sure.
since, I can show you since 2005, 7. We've never been closer. Take advantage of it.
Right.
Have a backup plan, but we want to go for it. We want to attempt to actually get it across that line.
Gail, did you have,
I did, so that is an error on my part, the 300,000, the last project was one that added in later, so the amount after these projects is 1.4 million.
Okay, well, I think Kim had a hand up and then Lanny, please. Kim,
I'm still looking for my information. So yeah, I think we have 1.411 left over after those top priorities, but I'll come back with my question.
okay, Lanny?
If we take funds from ARPA and just plug those numbers in there, is there money available for overruns instead of holding back ARPA funds? Is there money available within reserves or somewhere if we do run into overruns on the projects?
No,
well,
So,
technically the funding that gets saved for the project reserve.
so is there money that we could,
you would be able to
Yeah.
identify that with the timeline for these projects, if there was going to be an overrun for them. We're gonna start working on the 25 budget right off. Some of these projects aren't gonna be completed before we start doing the next budget cycle. Also, DPW staff is very good at moving funds around and being able to find the extra money. Obviously, if it comes back and it's a significant amount of money, then we would be having a bigger discussion. It's really critical that we execute. And again, these are all projects that Chris can go in the office tomorrow and Jeremy can start pulling, they're ready to go.
no,
So,
I'm fine to supporting it, but I just want to make sure that we have a way to identify, if we're going to have identified overruns, if there's a funding source that we can tap into for those overruns at the time. And if you feel that we're going to be able to have those covered, I'm supportive of just not holding anything back on ARPA for that.
Well, I think the alternative part of it would be, again, it's an extra 225,000 that we'd be putting in the paving. So at the absolute last resort, there would be that funding immediately available to cover any overruns.
Okay. And the other thing that I don't see on here, and I've spoke to before, is that can we not get something started for an engineering study even on Wilder water mains?
Well, there is on the open discussion list, there is an item on there to talk about funding engineering reserves.
Okay, because I know we can't dedicate ARPA funds to that because we're not ready for it, but we need to move that project along because we continually see issues with that water main.
Yeah.
I'm supportive of what's in front of us.
Okay, Mary?
Yeah, and I think, Lanny, it helps if, when we look at this, to also take into consideration the desired project start date. Several of them are 2023, 2024, construction completed 2024, 2023, 2023, 2024. So
Yeah.
it seems to me that the sooner we get started,
Oh, yeah,
the better our
I,
options are.
as I say, I fully support them. I just want to make sure that if there should be overruns, I will make sure that we have a way to do that.
Yeah.
Without compromising ARPA funds.
Sure, yeah, of course. Further questions from the board on this one? How do we all feel about this? Are these?
So that's page 1, and then we'll move on to page 2.
How do we want to attack this in a motion to dedicate ARPA funds to that, or how do you want to?
Well,
You
let's
want
see,
to
I think
see-
Rocket still had a question or two, right?
Oh, no, I'm just looking at this from high level and just saying, if this is a request for basically 1.35, is it million?
1.375.
1.375. So, and leaving a balance of 1.4 for ARPA. Looking at the second page, I'm sort of blending here. I do think that there is an opportunity for us to just greenlight this and still leave quite a significant amount for us to apply to these other departments. And then I think it's a conversation of how we balance the needs and priorities of the different departments.
And also including the conversation Kim had mentioned about the solid waste. So I just want to make sure that because it's not listed on there,
Right.
that we don't.
We can't dedicate funds to that until we have a study on that, though. In
You could
engineering.
dedicate funds to have a study done.
Yeah, engineering. So can I make a motion for?
Hold on, I think Ali had.
Well, no, I was just gonna say, I'd be in support of what Rocket proposed of greenlighting these high priority public works, but if you want to make the motion. Lane,
Yeah,
go ahead.
I make the motion that we allocate $1,375,000 to Public Works for the projects presented.
I'll second that.
If you have friendly amendment, I wonder, I know it might be laborious, but would it behoove us to go through each one individually?
All right, so I will.
Just the best thing to do.
Point of clarification, I was not suggesting that we make the motion just yet. I was just saying that I think if we temporarily put that in our green light pile and just took an examination, I mean, broadly, I think I have no opposition, but I do think it might be worthy of before formally making that motion,
Already been done.
at least looking at the other.
I already made the motion.
I understand. So I'm just clarifying my point. But you've made your motion.
We have a motion.
So I'm gonna
table.
clarify the motion by,
Okay.
as Ali suggested, for Public Works for $400,000 for Hartford Water, Gate Street Hill, Fairview Terrace, water main replacement, 400,000 for Quechee Water, total project 900,000, fund partially balanced from reserves, Quechee Main Street Water Main, 225,000 for Quechee Roads, total project 700,000, fund partially balanced from encumbered funds, FYE 2023, Quechee Box Culvert, original portion to be paid from reserves, 125K. This will allow paving reserves to be
You can
increased.
just say the
So there's
project's
good.
planning.
All right, I don't know how in-depth I wanted to go with this
No,
one.
I think if you just say
All right.
the amount and I got it.
$50,000 bridge maintenance capital improvement plan, 300,000 for Hartford Water.
Okay, well, we have a motion.
And I second the motion as
We have a
amended.
second. All right, discussion.
I think that we should table this motion and have a full conversation about all the other requests from all the other departments, as well as citizen requests, which we did commit early on last year that we would field and consider. I know, for example, the library, for example, has had some requests for ARPA funds, and I know that they are not the only ones. This is just the request from the department heads, and I am very supportive of DPW and all of the departments. I'm not sure that we should proceed with making the formal vote on this ARPA funding now, just as I was not sure that we should do that with the Bugby ARPA funding. Given that we have all the department heads here in the room and maybe a couple on Zoom, it might be worthwhile to have a full considered conversation about all of the expenses before formally approving any of the ARPA earmarks.
Well, we've just voted on it. I don't think we need to, I mean, we've agreed to this. We have the votes to pass it, I think. We can always go back and look at stuff, but I think we'll vote separately on each one for approval. Unless people have an objection. No,
Just clarification. So are you suggesting that when we do the final revisiting on Thursday, we might actually revote? Like on
we
each
don't
of
have to
them?
read on all of them, but I think if there's something we decide between now and then, like, oh, maybe we don't do ARPA for that one, I think we have the opportunity to do that at the next meeting.
Meaning we would claw back or bring.
If we won't do, I mean, I think when we're gonna go, we're gonna go through this, we're gonna see how much ARPA is being committed, we're gonna see all the department requests and what people put in. If we end up saying, like, oh, actually, maybe we can do this one with reserves instead, I think we can go back and do that. So I mean, I don't, but we've already made, the motion, I don't know why we need. to
Okay,
stay
so
on
just
the-
point of clarification, Mr. Chair, the motion then is to temporarily approve, or this is
The
to?
motion is to approve these with ARPA funds,
Okay,
and then if we end up changing it later on, we have the. But this will just, we'll get this locked in the book, right? So we can go on. Lanny?
Yeah, I'd like to remind the board that, as the town manager said, the main purpose of ARPA funds is for infrastructure. And these are infrastructure projects. Infrastructure is not libraries. no offense to libraries,
We
but
voted for
these are-
$8,000 for
these
Bugsy
are-
Senior Center.
these are main priorities for infrastructure. It's a building. It's infrastructure.
Thank you, Lanny. All right, I don't even remember if we voted on this.
We did
had
not.
a
We did
second.
not.
We did not. All right. All those in favor, say aye.
I,
Opposed?
I,
Yes or no?
I'm gonna abstain, but
Okay, we have 6 in favor and 1 abstention.
it's not because I do not support DPW. Of course I do. I just think that it would be judicious and fair to the other departments to do a full consideration first.
Okay,
All right, awesome. Scott Hausler, you want to get up there? You're first for your ARPA
yeah.
2 projects. Or you can come sit next to Paula, whatever you're more comfortable with.
I don't know.
All right, Scott.
good evening.
Thank you.
Does anybody have specific questions about the 2 items that he's recommending for his project, for his department? Otherwise, he can just give a brief summary.
Specific questions for Scott on these items? Maybe just a quick overview of what they are.
Sure. Thank you.
Of course.
As you know, we have reserve funds that are identified for a lot of, infrastructure improvements and capital needs. That's what we need is all about. So we took a look at that and identified, one of the projects that wouldn't, take several years to complete and utilize, the ARPA funds to do one project fully, right?
Yep.
Our CIP is, our descriptions of a lot of the CIPs are from year 2020 through 2025, and we readdress things. We look at things all the time as well, just to try to make adjustments to where we see things going related to various projects and amenities that we have in our facilities. So Lyman Point Park is one of those projects, taking some outdated playground equipment, providing safer accessibility, providing additional amenities for the public for this particular park. 20 years ago, 25 years ago, the existing layout of the facility was sufficient for what happens. COVID made a big, the pandemic made a big change to how we utilize Lyman Point Park. So we're taking advantage of that in planning and thinking of what Lyman Park would really benefit from, and the community benefit in general as well. So that outlines that particular project, and then our replacement equipment reserves identified a couple of pieces of equipment that we have, planned for our replacement. Utilizing our funds would allow us to do that and eliminate the need to fund the reserve, for at least this year and potentially, another fiscal year as well. So we can address those equipment needs. So that's a quick summary.
Yep. Questions for Scott?
Just quick, yeah, just a quick clarification, Scott. So is the Lyman Point Park improvements, which might be earmarked for ARPA or proposed earmarked for ARPA, is that the one exception to that's also not being proposed as a capital improvement project, or it also could be?
No, it's, so our CIP has equipment fund, our equipment fund for replacement equipment and
right.
additions. And generally, we wouldn't remove an entire facility, playground, we would add to it, right? So our equipment fund, replacement fund is established and designed so we could start doing some neat things and new additions to various parks every year. So we just started the reserve fund. It's not quite where we need it to be to really do, once it's necessary to replace all the equipment in all the parks, but the ARPA fund would allow us to do something really special for Lyman, to do one big project all at once, providing new equipment at this particular site, 100%.
Gotcha. Thanks.
So on page 63 of your operating budget, there's 2 reserve deposits for Parks and Recreation for their equipment, and then the playground equipment. So by funding the 2 projects that Scott has, we would be able to forego those funding deposits this year and potentially even next year. So the initial impact would be 55,000 less out of the general fund.
Okay, so the ARPA that would cover the entire Lyman Point, Lyman Park project, but then there's also the request for the reserves of like 35,000 a year over 5 years, is that right?
For the playground, it's 25,000,
Okay,
correct?
okay,
But Scott's willing to forego those deposits in order to get that project going. And then the same thing with his equipment. His annual deposit could be reduced because we're replacing that equipment in advance. Is that an accurate statement, Scott?
Yeah, and again, the ARPA has 3 years for purchasing.
Correct. It needs to be obligated by the December 31st, 2024, and it has to be executed by December 31st, 2026.
So one thing on the equipment piece, in particular, it's the electric mowers. Working with Dana and the climate action plan, and looking at our equipment that we have on a rotation, ready to replace. It might not be this calendar year, but next calendar year, because of the industry of electric mowers and technology, how it's changing, we wouldn't want to jump right away and get them both. We might wait a year to get another, but we need to have that funding available to do so when the right piece becomes available. So right now there's units available. Some of them are just now getting kind of test driven in the market. And we want to make the right choice. And we've had conversations with Dana to make sure that we're on top of technology as well as making the right choice when we do that.
Lenny, do you have a question?
Yeah, well, the Gale, I guess, did you pencil in 200,000 for this or 175?
I
I'm
didn't
trying to-
pencil in anything for it.
Okay, I'm trying to keep a running list of on Excel about.
I have an Excel spreadsheet going.
I do, okay.
But no, there's been nothing penciled in,
Well, we have 1.41. 1.41.
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah, so
you're-
really keep that in mind.
Mr. Chair, I have a question. Hey, Scott.
I don't think I was finished with mine yet.
Oh, okay, if you're not done yet, Lenny, please finish up.
What is your recommendation on this? Do we fund this project or?
I would rather wait until everybody has an opportunity to speak.
Okay, I'm sure you have this in your mind about funding you'd like to see though, so based on our.
Well, in my defense, everybody that's sitting here put a lot of effort into them, and
So
every single one of them. Each of them feel that their departments is
Of course.
more deserving than the next. So, and I appreciate that. That's great. that they
we're
do that.
one big happy family.
Okay.
Chopped liver, that's
So Rob, you have a question for Scott?
Lenny, are you?
Yeah, I'm all set, thank you.
Well, Scott, just a quick question on the electric mowers. What's the cost difference between gas versus an electric? Is there, I assume there's a lifetime cost savings using electric because you're not paying for gas and maintenance might be easier.
So the electric mowers like today.
Yeah.
They're about 3 times the cost of a gas or petroleum product. Mower. So, yeah, but there is value to them. There's less moving parts. And obviously you're not putting the emissions into the air, that type of thing. Dana's been great working through some of those. We've test driven one of those units, so it's interesting products, but they're very commercialized. It's not like you go down to Home Depot and picking up a battery, right? That's not gonna cut it.
Well, I'm so curious to know, and I know these are such new products, so we're not gonna have great market data, but what the lifetime cost is of a gas versus electric, because.
Dana?
Sure.
Yeah, I don't know offhand, but I know like for EV vehicles, the maintenance cost of 1/10 of what it is for a combustion engine.
Yeah.
So I'd have to assume that it's the same for that kind of equipment as well.
Yeah. Well, there's that, and then also a lot of oftentimes these mowers are running in parks with a lot of younger lawns, and that
Right.
off gassing I think is a great thing to be mindful of. So I'm not inherently opposed to them. I was just sort of curious about what that cost was.
Okay, any other questions for Scott? I think we have Connie, up next, please. Thanks, Scott.
So we want to,
We want to wait on these. I mean, those other ones were the main infrastructure, like spending. On this one, do we want to just go through and then decide? I think that makes some more sense.
okay, just to let the board know, we're down to 1,036,000.
Connie,
My numbers check with yours, 1,036,000.
No, 1.4.
I haven't put anything in yet. You
Okay.
haven't
No, you said you had an
anything for
Excel
sure.
running.
I do
You got
have
the
a
DPW.
spreadsheet Going.
Okay,
all right, Connie. So I don't know, we can start. Does anyone have any question in particular for Connie about these items with the ARPA requests? Or if not, if Connie, if you just want to give us sort of a overview of each item, that would be very helpful.
Questions or?
I do have a question.
Go ahead.
It's really on the wellness program and the virtual, what those make up. For me, a camera system seems obvious. The fact that they need DVDs seems ridiculous, and that there'd be a 2-year reserve save a CIP for this seems absurd to me. But yeah, if you could address the wellness program and what that would entail. I noticed that it's coming from maybe from Colchester, and it seemed like a long way to go for wellness.
They come to us.
Sure,
So
sure,
it's, in looking at wellness programs, I talked about this a little bit at the end of my budget presentation, but the information came too late to put into the budget. Basically what this, company does, it's a company run by either retired law enforcement, firefighters, or they're the spouses of, or the children of. So they are embedded into what we do for work, fireside and police. Their services are available not only to the employee, but the entire employee's family for those costs. So if a spouse is having problems with something that, a first responder is dealing with, they have access to those services. The services are also not just, I had a traumatic event. It's, I'm not sure this job's for me anymore. They'll help them over that. I'm having financial problems. Help them work through that. So there's a very broad spectrum, but it's by cops and it's by firefighters, for cops and for firefighters.
So this is more of a retainer than to be utilized rather than a one-off training or something like that.
Exactly. So that's the cost annually. And what they do is they'll send down workers. They'll ride along with an officer on midnight shift. So they build rapport. They get to know the officer's baseline. So, and they also, we have 4 of our officers, 3 or 4, going to training with their funding for pure support that's free. So they're like, hey, if you're not taking our services, at least here's something free that we can give your agency, so that way you can check it on each other.
Great.
So our goal is also to have at least 1 officer on every shift that's a pure support person as well for communications.
Connie, is this program available to firefighters as well?
If they want to join in,
They wanna
yes. They also said it would probably be a reduced fee because the more people that you have join in, they can do a lower per person fee. But this $500 per person or per family fee is for the amount of staff that we have in the police department and communications.
Okay, thank you.
And basically because it was put in late, and I got the information late, I was paying for it, funds to help on his first year, and then I can budget for it continually. But the services that they provide are amazing. They'll come down, we'll do yoga with the officers. We carry a lot of weight on us as well as the firefighters do. A lot of different things that are outside the box thinking that they do that's geared towards us.
So follow up with that, and maybe this is for Gail or Mike. Given that you got the information late and that's why it's coming through ARPA, is it too late for us to, we haven't voted on the final budget yet, right? So would it be possible for us to just, if we were to,
Yeah,
approve
we
it, to
could.
sort of put it into the budget? And it was that, I assume that's something you'd be open to.
Absolutely.
Okay, because that, from an accounting perspective and also from an ARPA perspective, it almost makes more sense to me. And then I guess, would that also be related, the same case for Virtua?
So Bertrand is a training academy, and I'd actually like to have Lieutenant Howell explain that a little bit better. He's been through some of the virtual training with it and has seen the demo on it. I have not.
Yeah, so the Virtua is actually a training simulator. The company, the federal government uses them. This system we're looking at is a mobile system. They make systems that are 360 degrees. This would just use a screen. So what this would do is give us the ability to do judgmental use of force scenarios and de-escalation scenarios. This is a addition to our current training platform. So what this is gonna, for us, we can set the virtual up and do this training on midnight shift. We can pull an officer off the road for an hour, go through some training blocks instead of having somebody come in on overtime. So we can have this set up. They can do it on duty for an hour. The night shift, same thing. All the programming is certified curriculum. So Virtua takes case law and current incidents that have happened around the country, and they build these scenarios out for us to go through. This really is going to be a liability reducer for us too, because the more we can train officers and push them through some stress inoculation, they're going to be able to make sound decisions in those high stress incidents that we deal with.
So is this a one-time fee or is this?
So the service fee, they're like, for instance, the only thing I didn't mention is they have a V-author program, which we could cater a scenario to us. So like we could build a program, we could take photos of downtown and make your scenario on South Main Street. I don't have the quote. The original quote we had was from earlier this year, and the rep has been out for 2 weeks. And I don't remember if there is a annual fee, but I can pull a quote and give you an answer in a couple minutes.
So this just called $89,000 then is really for a one-time setup fee? Is it a physical system that you're installing?
In the quote, and if Connie has it here, I have the quote, so I can quickly pull it up. I just don't have that prepared.
Thank you.
Question.
Rhonda, have you done? Did you have another question?
Yes, I'm done. Thank you.
Okay, Lenny.
Mr. Howell, I have a question about this, and I'm Connie, this will be on you as well. Is this something, I mean, I see the benefit of this, but is this software and program something that we could actually make money off of by having other departments come in and use it? I mean,
to be honest, I don't think that's a really good practice to charge other agencies. For instance, like we have a major incident going on today. State police are in working with us, working the scene, and they don't charge us. It's a lot of, if they need assistance from us, we provide it to them, vice versa. They invite us to trainings and they don't charge us for a lot of trainings that they invite us to. It's just kind of, we work together, we're all doing the same job, and they afford us some pretty decent training.
So how often would this software be used? This virtual training software, how often would it be utilized? Nightly?
Sorry,
would it be utilized nightly on a daily basis?
So we don't have the space where I did the demo was in our training room. So we will lose the training room. So it would be, this is a mobile platform, so if we could do it in our training room, we could do it in a room on the 3rd floor.
So you're talking about a big setup?
Yeah, it's a large screen, and with associated equipment that goes with it. Computer, so I'm an instructor, so I'm in the room with the officer, and there's the scenario comes up, and something happens and they take action. I can actually dictate, it gives me options to say, all right, the officer did the right thing, so we're going to go do this path. The officer did the wrong thing, we're going to go down this path. So that's part of the software. I would do it as much as possible. It could be monthly. It really is dependent on staffing and other things we're doing. I would do it as much as possible.
And is there any other agencies that have this software that they're currently using?
Department of Homeland Security, the state of Vermont had one at the academy. I don't know if they do anymore. They had a former version. There are other agencies in the state that are purchasing simulators or other type of software to supplement their training program.
And from the state police's standpoint, how much did this improve either officer safety or citizen safety by this?
The state police doesn't have this.
But they had something like this, you said.
The academy had
the
a
academy,
machine called fast machine, and I used it going through fire instructor use force school. It was a dated system, it's quite old, so the technology's rapidly enhancing, and everything. Like the Department of Homeland Security uses it. They run their agents through it constantly. I can't speak to exactly how it works for them, but it's a better program that they use.
There's a lot of cool stuff out there, but I just want to make sure it's a tool and not a toy. That's the big thing. So,
Did you see if it was an annual fee?
I pulled it up, it does not show it in their quote.
I didn't see it in there either. I just didn't know if I was.
Are there further questions on the items that Connie brought before us before we take a break?
Well, just, Mr. Chair, on this specific road trip, I mean, it sounds great, and I think simulated training is awesome, and also to have it where you don't need a trainer to be on site. I'm seeing in here that there's a 100, I don't know, what's the 1-year warranty, I guess the physical package of the projector, the computer and so forth, and then the author. Between those two, it's almost $30,000. Do we have a projector? Surely we have a laptop that of course, you guys could use. And if we maybe went without the author, then you're talking a cost of closer to $60,000.
Yeah, so we could certainly do without the author. The quote is for if we could have all the bells and whistles.
Sure.
The beauty of the author is we can make our own scenario based on what we see in our town.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, that to me makes total sense. I think one thing that I would want in terms of being just judicious with the ARPA is just I would love to see how much it's utilized, because I know you are extremely busy to begin with. If it was, and also because there's not a dedicated space for it. So if it's the inertia of setting it up and breaking it down, it never gets used, then I would love to see that $30,000 applied to another purpose. And if there's an opportunity then for next year, if this has been a great tool to say, department says we would love to have the author program, I mean, I would be all for that. It makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, if those are some things within this, that we could sort of trim down, I certainly would feel more comfortable supporting it, but I do think it sounds like a great program.
Questions, Lynn?
yeah, Connie has provided us with the 3 options, and the third option that she has here does not include that software in it. So if we're 204 versus 293, which sounds to me like it's something that would be more palatable, and also I gotta believe there might be grants available for going after software like this. Yeah, so I mean, I gotta agree with Rocket on this, is that I think it's great, but I mean, if we could go after this in a grant aspect instead of using ARPA funds on it, I would be willing to advocate for the third option that she's presented at 204,500. I don't know what anybody else's thoughts.
See how much?
Well, this
204.
thing seems very helpful and useful for the police force. I mean, if you don't want to fund it with ARPA, then we can find money from somewhere.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Without worrying about grants, but just fund it. It sounds like it'd be extremely helpful for training, particularly with the ability that it learns latest court decisions on use of force, things like that. Very helpful. Any other questions before our break for Connie?
Do you have would you like them to go back to pare it down a little bit to see what they can come back with? I mean, we're going to be coming back on Thursday, or is
I like option 3.
Well, I think it's a board decision on what we want to do with this one. And what do you mean, Gail, trimming it down?
Well, I think that Rocket had just asked if we were able to maybe not utilize all of those items that were listed and pare down the actual training program. And I guess I was just going, I just want to know if there's any action item for them to come back that would change your
Pare down
decision
the
whether or not to support it or not, is my question that I have.
Right.
Alex?
Yeah, I would be supportive of that, just so we know what the options are. If there's another feasible pared down option that would still give you all what you need, but maybe it's not quite at that figure, just so we see what's possible.
Will do.
Thank you.
Thanks, Connie.
Sorry, I misunderstood you. I thought you meant fire down the.
All right, we're going to take a 5-ish minute break. We'll come back at 10 to 8. Welcome back, everyone. We're back from our break. We're going to hear from Scott Cooney from the fire department on his ARPA request.
Yes, so thank you. So when Gail reached out to me, we talked briefly about ARPA and how ARPA could affect and also do some level of cost savings to the community. So obviously, fire apparatus is our most expensive capital item that occurs and reoccurs within the fire department. You do fund reserve accounts for fire apparatus, but in the last 6 years, we've seen the cost of fire apparatus nearly double. For example, the ladder truck we bought 4 years ago now for $900,000. That same truck out of the gate is 1.5. So in looking at our capital reserve plan, you are funding it at about $133,000 a year in the apparatus account. Engine 3 and engine 1 are both due to be replaced in the next 8 years. Engine 3 is due in 2026 and engine 1 is due in 2029. We figure engine 3 is probably a $750,000 new purchase, and that engine 1 is probably an $800,000 new purchase in 29. There's not enough funding in the reserve account to buy those 100%.
Yep.
We would have to do financing along with it. So if you look at the spreadsheet I gave you real quick, the one that says current plan shows that by purchasing a brand new engine 3 in 26 and a brand new engine 1 in 29, we would use reserve funding and also additional financing of about $1 million in the next 8 years. So what I did was reached out to the manufacturer, looked at the opportunity. Engine 3 is an 06 fire apparatus, but it's in relatively good condition because of how we've used it here in Hartford. And it's an excellent candidate for refurbishment, which means we'd send that fire apparatus to the back to the manufacturer. They'd peel off the body, they'd redo the engine, they'd put a new body on it, new tank, new fire pump, probably the cost of about $450,000, and probably give you another 10+ years of life out of that apparatus. So if we use the ARPA fund and made that one-time refurbishment of engine 3 and continued our funding plan in the reserve accounts, by the time we needed to replace engine 1 in 2029, we would have nearly all the funds necessary for a cash purchase then, and reduce our alternative financing or bonding for apparatus down to only $290,000. So I figure about a $750,000 savings to the community by doing the refurb with our funds.
That'll extend it, you think, 10 years?
At least 10 or more.
10 or more.
Yeah.
It's a pretty compelling pitch.
Questions for Scott on this item?
Once we don't roll it into the ditch.
All right, let's see. Thank you.
Oh,
Is that the only request you have under ARPA?
oh, sorry, Kim, that's right.
Kim has her hand up. Sorry, Scott, if you can come back. Hi, Kim.
Hey, I guess I'm curious as to why, like a more of a portion of the one-time use of Station 2 needs wouldn't be a better option. Like, I think if, granted, I love the idea of saving taxpayers $750,000 over long term, but if this is going to be an ongoing thing, like it's eventually going to have to catch back up. So I'm wondering if rather than just postponing that pain and instead increasing the reserves a little bit more to what they need to be as a more gradual increase, and then requesting ARPA funds for some of the Station 2 needs would be an option.
I did look at that, Kim. I think when I talked to Gail about it, it was very much, we were very concerned about the 2026 spending requirement for ARPA funds. We were not entirely sure we could pull off the engineering, architectural, and then securing a contractor to have the station built by 2026 in order to use ARPA funds. That's why we didn't include it as the ARPA pitch.
Okay, I guess that makes sense. And then sorry, I'm not looking at that portion right now from CIP, but the amount just for the scoping and engineering and stuff for the Station 2, is that, I'm sure it's here, but I don't have all these things printed out. I'm sorry.
No, I
Right,
think
so
what-
if you're looking at the board packet, it's on the agenda, the very beginning of it for the CIP, and it's on page 57.
And Kim, just to clarify, the Studio Nexus proposal that's in there has already been executed. That is what gave us the plans and the conceptual estimate back in 2021. And I think the board tonight authorized me to go out to RFP to get new pricing and actual cost, new cost, true costs for that project.
Okay, I mean, I guess, because I also just like the idea of refurbishing the engine as a way to kind of protect the equipment that we have as a, alternative to purchasing new. Okay, I mean, I'm just, if the rest of the board has any thoughts on it, great. If not, I defer to your and Gail's recommendation. Thanks.
Board members, Mike, any thoughts, Lynn?
I think it's an excellent plan, fully supported.
All right, thank you, Scott. Lori, you are up next for planning.
Okay. Let's see what
So,
we got here for you.
Yeah, if people have questions initially for Lori, or Lori, if you want to just give us a high level overview of everything, everything on the list.
Questions first or just going to review? Okay.
I'd say do an overview there.
Let's do that. Okay, so first thing on the list, and I'll is the $300,000 towards putting it towards our housing initiative and using this for leveraging funds. I know that the comment was we can't put it into reserve, but we could perhaps identify a certain amount of that could go into direct action for that'll be meeting the obligation, 24 obligation and 26 for expenditure. The activities that we're talking about here would complement a lot in terms of our accessory dwelling unit, which we are kicking off this year. We're working actively right now on designing the program. We're also working with our partners in the Upper Valley. And we're going to be having a trade show, an ADU trade show that we're putting together. So it's really going to be a how-to. If you want to do it, come on out and do it. And so some of the things we're talking about using those funds for would be to aid in technical assistance for individuals, and also starting to scope it out similar to how we do our Hartford Business Revolving Loan Fund, which is helping to leverage conventional financing. So somebody needed something like a 10% or a 20% in funding in order to get conventional funding, we could use this money to help someone actually do that. And it would be a revolving loan fund kind of activity, or we can do it at straight out grants. And in some instances, we could even write down interest rates. So that's a way of really starting to move it along. We're not talking big amounts to any one project, but spreading it out amongst individuals who are interested in putting together ADUs.
Do you foresee enough? Will you be able to basically use up the 300,000 by the time it needs to be spent, or do you
well, it all depends on how fast we roll it out. I think to be more on the conservative side, it might be better to try and do the best that we can do it, see where we are at a certain point, and then reprogram the dollars, or right off out of the bat, say, $150,000 towards it. And then we'll go from there. If it's a revolving loan fund, it is going to be a long-term payback situation, but it's for the full amount. But as we do with the revolving loan fund, that money keeps coming in every month back into the project. So that's just one way in which we could potentially use the dollars.
Yeah. Do you have a question on that subject, right?
Well, it's just a little bit nebulous for me, I guess. I hear what you're saying, but I would love to see specific programs and amounts and timelines for those. I don't know if you have that.
Well, like I said, we're in the rollout period now, and
yeah, I understand.
we're, it's.
Mr. Chair, do you have other specific questions about?
Okay.
Other
Yeah,
line
go
items,
So,
if I might.
Sure.
If you're done, Lori, with that first item.
Go right.
Okay, well, the first one is 233 parking meters, something I think conceptually I'm supportive of. It's a very specific number. Has that been put out to bid?
Well, we actually have an updated vendors thing that it actually includes an increase in it for the 2023. We haven't done the full gamut in terms of putting it out to bid. This is one of the vendors. There aren't a lot of options out there really in terms of giving us what we're looking for. It's a vendor that's actually active in the Upper Valley right now. And so we have a lot of good feedback from them. But based on that, the one piece I want to leave you with on that is that the payback of that is less than a year.
Great. And then a question.
And those funds could actually roll into operating funds that we would generate. And how we calculated that was 50% usage of the space. We charged $1 an hour, 50% use, which we're probably closer to like 70%. 5 days a week, 8 to 10 hours a day, payback less than a year for all of that.
And so Lori, a question on that. I'm trying to find it in the packet, but I remember seeing a couple options because there's obviously the physical meters at the spots and there's kiosks.
Right.
And it seemed like the kiosks were actually cheaper. Is that, do you have a?
So I will
Is that
tell you
correct?
that the kiosks would be the ones that we were programming to put in the parking lot. People, it's in a confined space. People are looking for a kiosk. The challenge that we have with using kiosks on an area is that they get missed by the patron. People don't see the signs. You still have to put up the posts for the signs. So you're still having to go around them, all of that. But the experience has been in some of those situations that people don't see them. And then it becomes an enforcement issue. And people feel like we haven't been properly represented. So that's the reason why we were going for the individuals, but certainly you look at it. The payback is certainly a lot shorter.
Okay, and then continuing with the kiosk versus meter question, this is maybe a DPW question, which is with parking meters at each stall. I mean, I got a compliment, which Jeremy, I told you that the downtown business owners have been very happy about how well everything's been plowed. Do meters interrupt with that? Does that make it materially harder or is it?
Well, that's one of the things. Let me give you a little thing here. I'll give it out to all of you. The top part will show you it's a dual situation with the posts. So we have half the amount of posts to the number of units here. And that's the first picture. So that gives you a visual of what it is. The second one is an actual special sidewalk cleaning machine. And I'm going to let Jeremy speak a little bit more about it, but it gives you flexibility not only to clear around parking spaces, but the posted signs that we would have to have posted there about parking and no parking and what the charges would be. And the kiosks themselves, as well as also this. And the one thing I'd also like, before we jump into the mechanics of that, I'd like to just talk about for a second why this is important. We have a parking challenge for us, and we know that one of the ways to address that is to be able to have people self-monitor the amount of time that they stay in the space. Recent Vermont state case law basically said that marking tires is not an enforceable way. And it also demands quite a bit of time on the police department to go out there and do that, as well as being able to go to the court if any enforcement. So this is a way to really address part of the parking management plan that we've been talking about for many, many years, and also do it in a way, because there's all kinds of technology that goes along with this in order to enforce.
Lori, one question on this, just this amount is for like physically like putting the meters in, right?
Well, we were actually going to install the poles ourselves.
I guess the question is,
But
does
that's
this
not
funding include any money for someone to go and actually write the tickets?
Okay, so that's where the payback comes in. In some of these, it actually, since it's less than a year for us to get a payback on 233,000, well, 210,000, because it's the.
Do you know who would enforce the?
Right, so those
ticket?
are things that you could hire. What other communities do is they hire someone that is their specific job, and that the revenue that would be coming in for this particular activity could cover the operating expenses, which also includes all kinds of technology and little hand meters and things like that. Every once in a while, you will need to have somebody who would go and collect the money.
Right, so to answer your question, no, it does not include operating costs. This only covers the equipment.
The actual.
Right, but the money that would be earned on it would cover the operating.
Okay, thanks.
Is this in there or separate? Separate.
Yes, that is.
That's budgeted in.
I
Into
haven't
the
seen
230.
this, so I don't know what it is.
Oh,
So
How nice is that?
That's neat.
Like-
Yes, we did. We anticipated your question.
question.
Just Lang.
So, these heads, are they flush with the sidewalk? Or they sit back? In other words, are they proud with the face of the curb? Or they sit back from the curb?
Well, they'll need
The
they'll
heads.
need to sit back in order so that the cars don't hit them.
I know, but I'm saying as far as for plowing the actual street itself, I mean, are we gonna have to dodge in and out of?
Well, I'm gonna
okay.
leave that. Guys.
No,
I mean-
they'll have to be far, they'll be far enough back with the bumper overhang, which is gonna be required.
Okay.
So, I'll be able to go out there with it.
We've got enough issues there now, you know, need
The
to,
sidewalk can be maintained in regular storm to, from the building to the meters, and then this machine is strictly for when pickups are downtown, will allow them to in between to get everything figured out.
oh, so, okay, so this will not be the regular, this will be only for cleanup of when you do,
Clean up for
Big
those
cleanup.
very, very big storms where we gotta stay on top of it, keep it pushed off.
and this is like a sulky type thing, or is this,
The four-wheel drive,
are you right on it, like a,
you're right on your, spot, how we actually has the grandstand for or more, it's the same concept, just with four wheels above.
yep, that makes sense.
Thank you.
Okay.
Lori, so moving on with that, I'd say I'm very supportive of the parking meters. Scoping project for Sykes Mountain is 20,000 and the scoping project for Quechee Village is 260,000. Can you
It's,
explain
it's,
it?
it's size and it's where it is. So, this is a very small, the 20,000 one for the area that gets you to the Chambers, mobile home park. That's what we're talking about on the $20,000 is, it's a very small area. And so what we're trying to do is, really finish this missing link.
I see. That's it. And I guess a question we had in our packets, and I don't see it here, and I don't know that it would fall under your department, but the $200,000 request for the Friends of the Quechee Bridge, would that fall under your department, or is that sort of?
This is part of, it's an open discussion item along with the solid waste facility.
I see,
that
so
will
just
be
on the
discussed,
side.
Correct.
Lori, any other questions for Lori?
Do you want me to go through any of the other items on that or?
Planning?
Yeah, so I have a question. Explain to me more about the Quechee West Hartford Bridge, the improvements that were to be projected for that. What is it that the plan is? Just basically increase the sidewalk width?
Well, right now, they're more curb areas, like travel lane. And then the areas on the side. So right now, you could do it one of two ways. You can have increases a little bit on each side, but or a preferred option may be just to have realign the center line and go ahead and have a 4.5, 5 foot walking
On one side.
on one side. There's
Okay.
two options you can go.
So we're not talking about putting a cantilever sidewalk out or anything.
No,
foolish like
we're
that,
just talking about.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then a question about the Route 14 pedestrian bike improvements for the restriping. Where is that actually taking place at? Your last one on the list of West Hartford Route
West
14.
Hartford, it's on Route 14. It's between the library and what used to be the community store,
Okay,
village store.
so I'm going to ask our resident from West Hartford out there, Mike.
Yeah.
Do you see a need for this in West Hartford?
I see plenty of people who bike out there. The road is fast, and there aren't really great signs or markings or anything. So I certainly, I don't bike, so I don't have really like a dog in this one. But yeah, I mean, I think that area could use some improvements in terms of marking the road, any improvements that will help like safety. I mean, we do get a lot of people who bike out there. A couple areas, it's nice and scenic. So, I certainly wouldn't be against it.
What is it meant for, like restriping? I'm not sure where you're not going to improve anything for sidewalks there,
It's a
so.
wide shoulder. And one of the things that when we've been looking at different ways in which we can accommodate pedestrians and bicyclists without necessarily building the traditional sidewalk. And in areas where we have large areas that are part of the right of way, but they're not part of the travel lane. Do we have enough area to create separation for safe travel with pedestrians and bicyclists?
And how much of that would have to actually go through the state to get approval to get that?
We've actually, this is something that, and in one of the notes here is talking with them about coordination with paving. And this is something they sometimes do, but that's gonna be a ways off.
Seems like
ways off.
$36,000 for restriping is real expensive.
Well, this is a comment in support of this item actually to the board. I mean, to me, a strip of paint costing, I guess I'm new to how much these things cost. It seems a lot, but I would take your word for it. And I will say that I do think that section is actually very important, including the bridge, because that's where Lori, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's where the Appalachian Trail connects, right?
Yes, it is.
So there's actually a lot of foot traffic that comes through
Yeah,
that way,
right.
especially during the warmer months, as well as the parking and swimming traffic that goes across that bridge right there. Usually there's quite a lot of pedestrian traffic during the warmer months that would make sense to create some sort of safety barrier. I think they'll be responsible to citizens and visitors.
Right, and there is some engineering work that needs to be done on that strip of Route 14 drainage, and there may be some curbing that needs to be done.
Well, let's not get too carried away, but
Yeah.
Thank you, Lori. Questions on that? Any other items here? Before we take a step back and look at the whole thing. Thank you, Lori. I will save till Thursday my annual pitch why
Can I-
parking meters are a bad idea.
Can I ask one more
So
question?
we'll do that next time. Yes, Manny.
I'm a little bit confused about the Housing Development Reserve Fund. When it says ARPA doesn't allow reserve funds, it requires expenditure by 12/31/26. So I guess I'm not following why we've got it in there if we can't use ARPA funds for that.
Because what I'm saying is we wouldn't necessarily put it into a reserve fund, you just do a direct allocation. Reserve was a way of saying it's gonna be earmarked for this specifically for this. If we can't do it as a reserve, you just allocate it like you would for any other project.
Thanks, Lori.
And
Kim
is
has
it-
a question. If you're done, Lynn.
Well, is there other ways that we've done housing development?
I thought Lori had covered this earlier.
I just-
but go ahead. Lori.
I just didn't know if there were other ways to cover housing development. I mean, we do that already, right?
this isn't. this is not-
Are you asking, are there other funding sources
Yeah.
such as the
Yeah.
state or something like that? Well, we're pursuing everything that we can. So,
Okay, thank you.
Kim, you still have your hand up?
Yeah, sorry, Lori, did you give a little more detail on the Quechee Village engineering, the 260,000 scoping study?
So let me get that out in front of me, so we can. Okay. The $260,000 is the estimate of what it would take for us to do the engineering on that. My suggestion for this is that it is something that we feel we could get done within the time period. It would kickstart off this project. It would give us a good feeling and understanding as to what the total construction cost would be. And that's why it was being recommended at this stage, rather than putting it off again and again and again. At least we can start it and then we'll be ready for the next stage. Did that answer your question? Kim?
Yeah, what's the overall project?
Okay, so this is the $26,000 is on Quechee Main Street, and that's a sidewalk project, and it's gonna go from Willard Road to the covered bridge. It's the main area of the village that has been, I think that we hear the most common comments about it's not safe, there's no place for pedestrians to go. It's a very narrow, crowded, active street. And there are ways in which there is a feasibility study that was done that laid out the concept of it. And so this would really be getting at one of the major issues that we've heard over and over and over again since at least last 10 years. That should get at what you're looking for again.
Yeah, basically, I'm kind of in my looking at what we have left for ARPA funds and anyway, I'm kind of narrowing down my priorities. And I guess I'm just not fully aware of how much of a priority that one is compared to other things.
So the alternative funding, if the board would like to pursue that project, the alternative funding is to add in $87,000 a year to deposit into our reserve account and wait until we achieve that amount of money. So the project can be executed at that point in time.
Is that already an existing reserve account?
No, it's not. It would be a new one.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Lane?
Yeah, question to Gail. Is parking meters something that could come out of TIF?
I don't believe that it can. We've talked about it multiple years, but Lori's the expert in TIF, so I would.
So,
defer to her.
when you start charging, for structures like that have revenue coming in, that creates a different dynamic with the TIP program in terms of how they look at it. It was not something that was identified in our original plan, was putting in parking meters. We talked about doing parking garage.
Okay.
But that's a kind of a dicey area because now you're going to be reporting income based on funds that you receive from the TIP revenue.
Thank you.
One thing I remember, one of the reasons I'm not really personally against parking meters, but I do remember that this was on the ballot a few years ago for use of local option tax funds, and the taxpayers rejected that as a use. Now, I looked at it and I didn't say I don't want these because it comes out a lot and not the general fund. I was just against kind of the idea. So you could try and put this under lot and let the voters decide. I mean, they've already decided. That's what always surprises me, that we keep bringing this back up each year if they've decided they don't want it. But I don't know how much the local option tax funding we have remaining, but that's always an option if we didn't want to do it.
So can I respond to
Yeah, of
that?
course.
Because the reason why it keeps coming back is because the voters still want us to enforce, and we have no way of enforcing. The state court system has basically said the mechanism that is typically used, which is talking, doesn't hold water,
Yeah.
and it's not an enforceable thing. So it keeps coming back to people want the 2-hour parking enforced, and there's no way to do that. Also, empirically, it has been established through a variety of studies to show that people, when they have to feed a meter, they self-monitor themselves. And so you have better enforcement just by self-monitoring because people know they have to go feed a meter.
I don't doubt that.
So,
I just don't think people will do it.
people are riding around looking for parking. We know that we have cars that are sitting in a spot that are there for an extended period of time. And so it is a management tool that I think is not always understood as to what it actually achieves and what it brings to the viability of the downtown and the businesses, and then being able to be patronized by people.
Sure, I get that. You have a question?
No, she's lawyer.
Okay, thank you, Lori.
So the last two items to talk about are the solid waste facility and the additional request. I'm sorry, it's more than two. Friends of Quechee regarding their request. And then the overall request to start a engineering reserve.
Okay, just an initial question. Do you know, do you have the figures, like if these were all items we approved with ARPA, how much would be left after?
There's not enough money.
We're below.
Oh, there's not enough.
We're already down
$500,000.
520, okay.
528 is what I came up with.
You're saying if we greenlit everything.
If we greenlight everything, we're down negative 528,440.
Thank you.
Well, I had a question about solid waste, but you have.
That was my question too.
Okay, great. And I know, I see Kim has her hand up too. I'm trying to remember if our previous public works director, I thought that we had moved last year towards a discussion around moving to close the transfer station, but I don't know if there was actually any amount that was, and I don't know, Jeremy, if you have any answer to this, if there was any sort of amount that we had sort of identified as a possibility for what that could look like. I know I'm in support of that because I feel like we're moving in that direction, but I wonder what.
So currently under directive from previous public works directors, previous town managers, we were trying to do everything to get the facility full.
Okay.
So where we're currently at right now, and again, with, for lack of better words, another town manager, we got to bring everybody up to speed with everything. We're currently in the early stages of a lease study with two possible identities. Would we would need to fix issues with a bunch of stuff down there, but this conversation needs to be brought with Gail and Chris and myself, and there's a lot more to it that I can't really rely on tonight, if that makes sense.
Sure.
And Kim has.
Hey, Kim?
Oh, I'm not muted. So Jeremy and Gail, would you not recommend a study for the next phase of the transfer station? I didn't hear that, all of what Jeremy said. There was something about possible leases.
I think that the board needs to make a decision if they need to make a decision. Do you want to keep it open, or do you want to close it? And if you want to close it, then you need to give the directive, and we will start working on what needs to be done. Obviously, it'll be a complicated situation for it to happen, in a lot of moving parts, but making a decision and giving the directive, we can actually go one way or the other. If you want to keep it open, I would say having another study done to determine what is needed to actually keep it open, which would include some updating and so forth. And as I stated earlier, if the decision is made that you want to keep the solid waste facility open, I would recommend that you take it back into the government fund, which means into the general fund, because it's not self-sufficient. And even if you do all of the upgrades that you have, it is very expensive to run that facility. It's not going to be self-sufficient.
Right. So I think, I mean, I feel like from the number of years that I have heard various presentations about the transfer station, I'm in favor of closing it. I don't know how familiar the rest of the board is with those two options. And I'm curious as to how, is there any potential to have some strategic community input on the matter, so that, I mean, I'm in favor of closing the transfer station, but that could be a not very popular decision, and it would be interesting to get I don't know, be curious if the rest of the board feels like they have, if they can answer that question tonight. Do you want to keep it open or close it? And if so, I think ARPA funds for whatever that next phase would need to be would be a really good use. And I've been whittling away and looking at how to find that within the funds available, being $501,000 short. That's anyway.
So Kim, point of clarification, closing the facility, do you mean closing it so the town of Hartford is not operating it, or closing it and having another entity operate it?
I think closing it as a solid waste facility entirely, and maybe looking at it in terms of some potential for a training facility for HPD and the fire department as well, adding another 500 kilowatts of solar there, some other potential use for the existing structures. But I think we have determined that we can fulfill all the state compliance needs without having a physical solid waste facility there. But it's going to cost money.
Jeremy, do you have any comments that you'd like to add?
The only comment I can add is, I know to go let you guys know, I believe last week we were closing the solid waste facility on Wednesdays and Fridays. I'm not entirely sure I got in the paper last weekend, but it will this weekend when I finally received one phone call that I'm very unhappy resident about that. And it's,
Jeremy, I can't hear very well. Could you say that one more time?
so we did get one complaint over the partial closure that we're doing in the upcoming month from a resident that wasn't happy that we were closing on those 2 particular days.
So that kind of represents that if there was great support for keeping it, we probably would have heard more comments.
I believe there's gonna be a lot more comments. We're handing out flyers when people are bringing in their trash and recycling, and it's hitting the paper and it's hitting social media. So I would assume people are gonna start getting more vocal as we get closer to.
I have one quick question for you, Rocket. Gail, I guess the question is if we weren't at this moment comfortable making a decision to close it and keep it open, and we wanted to hear more info on it, like, is that going to affect anything with our timeline for the budget?
No, my only recommendation would be that you would set aside, a certain amount of the ARPA funding. If you wanted to use those funds to do the study to determine whether or not you want to keep it open or not. That's pretty much it. Other than that,
Gotcha. Rocket.
So my question is, what does it cost us to keep it open? What does it cost us to close it? Do we need a study to know the cost?
that's fine.
Man, you gotta study do everything.
You do need a study. I mean, you have an opportunity to look at the Fund 30 budget when it was presented, so you know what it costs to operate it. And
Right.
in order to determine whether or not we want to continue the operations, which includes a lot of repairs and upgrades, et cetera. But that's just to bring it up. That's just to take care of all the deferred maintenance and make it functional, so we're not constantly chasing ourselves around.
Sure.
But that's not going to change the overall, that it does not make money. So does the board want a facility that's going to make money? Do the taxpayers want their taxes to go up to support that facility?
Rocket.
Yeah, so I'm also thinking about the conversation we had with Chief Cooney about Station 2 and the ARPA restrictions that it needs to be expended by 2026. So I'm wondering if it even makes sense for us to be thinking about using ARPA funds to keep this open per se. That said, I think it would be useful to consider doing a study at least so that we have better information. It seems very vague to me as to what the total,
Right, so you definitely would expend the funds within the time frame that you need to expend them to do the study.
yeah,
Going along with that, once you get the determination, if you want to keep it open, you're obviously going to need to bond for it.
right.
So that's not going to happen this cycle anyways.
So really what we'd be considering with ARPA funding is whether or not to fund a study. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
And how much?
Yeah. We had an estimate of the study.
I can use that information on that.
That'd be
Would you be
great.
able to get it for Thursday?
Okay.
Cool.
Danny and then Dan.
So, Kim had mentioned that we have a plan in place to deal with the requirements, the state requirements. Do we have a composting plan put in place? And do we have a brush plan put in place if we were to close the facility?
Not if you're to close the facility.
Okay, that's the problem. So if we do close the facility entirely, we still have to provide for composting and for brush disposal by state requirements.
No, they have to get.
I believe I know, I can with reasonable assurance say that we have to provide for refuse disposal for lawn debris and stuff. I'm not sure about the composting thing, but if you get back, because if we do close it, we got to look at that aspect as well, how to provide service for the citizens of that aspect.
Well, I believe that would all be completed, that would be included in the study of what they would be putting together is what would it cost to close it, and closing it would include any additional services that are still required, even though the actual facility is not open.
Yeah, okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I see what you're talking about, but I don't know if we'd have to have a truck there for people to dispose of stuff into for that kind of stuff. And if so, what's going to prevent them from throwing other things into it? So.
My understanding from presentations we've had previously is that those things need to be available to residents, but the town does not have to provide them. So that, for example, I mean, even with regular recycling, solid zero waste recycling, the town doesn't have to provide that because residents can get it through private haulers or trash removal, that kind of thing. And I think compost and I don't know about the brush part, but I know that compost was one of those elements that as long as it's available to residents, it doesn't have to be provided by the town, is my understanding.
And that's a good point. I mean, the town pays almost $300,000 a year to provide recycling to certain residents. Not everybody who lives in the town of Hartford receives that benefit. So is there a consideration that you don't want to do recycling anymore and you take that $300,000 and invest it in solid waste?
Dan?
Yeah, thanks. I think that, as Kim said, she's mentioned some good points here. I think we've been talking about this for many years. I don't think the residents are fully aware of the costs associated with this. And I think if we're going to continue having some sort of recycling facility, that we need to charge for those costs. And as we know, those costs are going to be astronomically expensive, and it's cheaper to go to Lebanon to do it yourself. I also think, as Gail just pointed out, there are a lot of services that we provide to 60 or 80% of the population, like curbside. Again, that's very expensive. The market's dropped out of recycling, as we know, so there's no money in that. We used to get some benefits from that, but not so. So I think we need to look at the whole picture. I think that perhaps what we need to do is, we've heard over and over again, we had study after study, it's just not making any money. So how much money do you want to keep pouring into a facility that's losing money? And I think once residents realize that, they might say, okay, let's farm this out to a private organization that can do pieces of it, where they do the compost, where they do the brush. But we know that the physical infrastructure there, the road and the buildings, are deteriorating. So, yeah, if we had $1 million that we could just pull out of a hat, that's great. But it's a bottomless pit of money that's just not working. And so many people in town just don't want to take the time to go there. They have private services and the resources to have someone come pick it up at their place. It's serving a very limited number of the population. So I think that, like we do with WABA or we do with the pool or whatever, we potentially have subsidized that for many years, but now I think we need to charge the people that actually use it the actual cost to use it, so they have some concept of what it's costing taxpayers, and that will eventually save them money. And they're like, this is just not worth it. We've got other options out there. That's my take.
Thank you, Dan.
So is it right that we maybe don't need a study if we were just to make the decision to shut it down and then to move that direction? Or is it that we need a study either way?
You definitely need a study because we need to know what there's specific things that, I'm not sure if study is the correct word.
An
I would
assessment.
say a plan of action, whether or not you were going to close it. None of us sitting here, or nobody that's employed currently with the town, is an expert in solid waste.
Right.
And so we would need a plan of action to either A, we're going to keep it open and this is what we need to do, or B, we're going to close it and then this is what we need to do.
Great. So that sounds like our logical next step is to figure out what that would cost to do some sort of some plan of some sort.
Yeah,
And then for us to
Jeremy
figure out
said
how
he might be able to get us something on Thursday.
That'd be great.
Otherwise, it'll keep going. I mean, like, it's not gonna, we'll still be able.
I mean, you can
pass
definitely
on.
just set aside, if you wanted to set aside, it's not going to be cheap. I mean,
Yeah.
I would say a minimum 50,000 and probably up to 100,000 you could set aside. And if it comes in, it's less than that. Then you can have a party with the other 25,000 and fix some sidewalks or put some new signs up to make people happy.
It sounds, yeah. That sounds good. Okay, so what do we got left so it sounds like we're gonna hear from Jeremy on Thursday.
You're gonna hear from Connie on the.
And we're gonna hear from Connie, yeah, and then. So we wanted to think about the Friends of the Quechee Bridge.
Yep, Friends of Quechee Bridge to talk about. We just talked about solid waste and then overall funding engineering reserves for infrastructure projects. That is currently not in the budget.
Gotcha.
So those are the items for discussion, and I don't have any feeling one way or the other. It's all about you.
Yeah, well, I think we can start with the Friends of Quechee Bridge, probably, right? We have their information in the
Correct.
packet. And just to summarize sort of those, I forget how much they're asking for. 200 that would complement, I believe, 150,000 they've raised, like, from private donations.
180, yeah.
Yeah, and then you can see sort of the plans with the parking lot there next to the covered bridge. And then some sort of landscape, things like that. I'm looking at Scott because I think he might know.
Yeah, no, I don't think that we're not gonna have staff speak about it. I think as the finance director, I gave you my recommendation that given what we have going on in our community and all the different needs that are going on, that I don't support funding it this year.
Yeah.
And we're not under a specific timeline. Yes, the town does have a responsibility. Speaking with staff, what's currently there is functioning perfectly fine. There's no health and safety issue. So I think utilizing the ARPA funding that we have and not increasing the tax rate to fund this year would be in the best interest of the town. If the town would like to commit funding to maybe fund it in 2 or 3 years and split it up that way, I think that would be, again, it's a decision of the board, but that's my.
Anyone have any strong thoughts on this, Laney?
So who is it that's done the work out there so far? Is Parks and Rec done that, or who's done the work out there as far as putting the rocks up there?
So the current work that has been done on the garden space and the rocks and everything is a collaborative. All right, so do we not recognize that the area needs to be kind of beautified? Yes, we do. So that's one of the things that we did. We worked with them. They raised some money. We found some rocks, right? We found some dirt. And they graciously paid for a landscaper to come in and plant some plants and get the area kind of beautified to complement what they've done on the hillside.
I personally think it looks good.
Yeah, no,
what
it
you
really
guys have done.
does. It really
So
does.
I'm impressed with what's happened. Just to get rid of the parking in that grass area, that was a big plus.
Right.
Now people are all parking on pavement, which is what they should be doing. So I think that, I mean, this is something that could be piecemeal. I don't think we need to dedicate the whole thing to it all in one step. So what's been happening in collaboration with the town is pretty good.
Okay. Is anyone rocking?
Yeah, I was just wondering, Gail, maybe if you have some information. I know there's been a private commitment of a pledge of $50,000. And what is it? Is that contingent on the town supporting at a $200,000 level, or is it just us nominally? Like, what are the conditions of that pledge? Because one thing I
The
do.
information I have is what's been provided to me.
Okay.
I have no other information.
So maybe I'll write to them, because I think one thing that is great about that area is just how much the citizens there have really taken it upon themselves to be engaged and to take it upon themselves to fundraise and to beautify that portion. Obviously, it is their part of town, but I think that there's something very noble about that, and something that would be great for the town to support in whatever way we can. With that said, Gail, I think you make a great point. We've heard a lot of very real material needs that are kind of more nuts and bolts from the departments. So I want to find the right balance, but I would love to find a way to make sure that those citizens feel like we hear them at the select board level and respect that energy and that commitment. I mean, these drawings they've taken upon, they formed a whole 501c3. I mean, I think it's a really tremendous amount of citizen engagement. So I guess I'll send them an email and we can talk and bring it up another time just to figure out what that.
We've got Thursday for any last minute items. So if you can get any more information, that would be helpful. I do agree with you. I'm impressed by what they've done. And I think Lanny makes a good point that they've been working well with the town as well. All right, so we'll table that one till Thursday. All right, now what do we have left? Give me a whole list.
DPW engineering reserves.
DPW engineering reserves. Okay.
So there's currently not a reserve fund for engineering, and as we know, we have lots of projects and we'll continue to have lots of projects. And those are recommendations from Public Works to consider it.
Oh,
Kim has her hand.
Kim?
I strongly recommend this. I feel like that there is way more potential for us to have, quote, shovel-ready projects if there is engineering funds that are already allocated that we don't need to find throughout a current fiscal year. So I would defer to Jeremy and Chris and Gail as to what that amount should be, but there should be enough in there to at least be able to pull from to do 1 or 2 engineering projects, so that if we have resources for, I mean, we may get more infrastructure money still for whatever the case is, but basically, like, if we don't have projects on the shelf ready to go, then they just don't get done. It's my 2 cents on that one.
Thank you, Kim. Is there a number associated with this?
I believe that we can provide that to you on Thursday. I have a rough estimate, but I don't want to speak outside.
Okay, do we want to get an estimate on Thursday to look at this? Sort of sounds like it. Lanny, you have a question?
But my question is, we can't use ARPA funds for reserve funds, so where are we?
That's correct. We're not
Yeah,
speaking specifically about ARPA. We're talking about funding
Okay.
in general.
All right, so with the Quechee Park, is that the end of the discussion about use of ARPA funds or?
The discussion for the Friends of Quechee was not necessarily ARPA funds. It was in general of how the town would, if they would like to support that project. You obviously have the option of doing either ARPA funding, or you can increase the tax rate to do it.
We need
Those are your
to,
two options.
we need to basically parse out $528,000 worth of all these projections though,
We do.
in order, we haven't
Well,
done
hold
that.
on a second, you know, we've got the
So
remainder
we
of this
just
meeting.
finish
and
talking about the last
Yeah.
item that we have, and then we can circle back to the ARPA.
Just so we know where we are on pretty much everything. Jeremy's gonna get us possibly some estimates for a survey, solid waste facility. Rocket's gonna reach out to Friends of Quechee Bridge and we'll talk about that Thursday. We'll also get a number on what would be a sufficient amount that we think would help start an engineering reserve fund for DPW. So that does leave us, whether we do it tonight or on Thursday, to look at this list of ARPA requests. We know that it's 528,000 more than we have remaining in ARPA. So I guess the question is, how are we gonna cut this down? And do we want to try and cut it down now, or do we want to think about it?
To do,
You want to do
you
it now?
need to cut out the ones you definitely don't want, or you need to pick the ones you definitely do want. You need to do one or the other
Okay,
before we leave tonight, so we know what we're working on come Thursday.
okay, fair enough. Well, I'll open it up to discussion. You wanna have ones they don't want, or they don't think is the best use of ARPA?
Yeah, I have a.
Yes, Alex?
I would be interested in seeing if the proposed from the police department, the employee wellness program, I think Rocket, you brought it up, the 14,500, if that could be a consideration for that department budget instead of ARPA, because it feels like something that would be long-term and necessary for long-term as part of the budget. So that doesn't necessarily save us money because we'd be bringing that back into the department budget, but I would think maybe ARPA not so much for that.
Okay,
But supportive of that.
so idea of the 14,500 would go into the general fund,
Yeah.
essentially. Rocket?
Yeah, I think that something that's not on here that we should earmark off is price flexibility or some sort of reserve, because especially with the DPW projects we talked about, but really with any of these quotes that we receive from department heads, I realize that your teams have all done your best in terms of pricing accurately, but given what the last couple of years have done with pricing, I think we should maybe set aside, is it 10 or 15%? I don't know if you would have a recommendation.
So in order to do that, you understand that it has to be fully expended by.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, I mean, I'm just
Setting aside, or is it just not spending?
not earmarked. It's not leaving it on earmarked, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think basically instead of operating with 1.4, I think we should maybe operate in mind with 1.2. To
Yeah,
earmark.
well, a quick one, we've done it before, is putting the question of the parking meters to the voters under the law.
There's not sufficient
There's not
funding the way
sufficient
that
law
it's
funds.
proposed right now to be
Okay.
put together.
All right, well then, that's that.
So,
Annie?
yeah, so I gotta say, I do not believe that we should be cutting ARPA funds. We should, I asked a question before about overruns in pricing. And I was assured that we could find the money to pay for overruns. So I think we should operate in line with the 1.4 that we're starting with here. I don't believe that we should be looking at setting anything for ARPA funds aside. We should be using, expending those funds, not putting them into whatever you want to classify as a reserve fund. If I were going to try to cut something, I would say we could have planning and development and cut out the $300,000 for housing development reserve and do $150,000 for housing development reserve. Still put some money towards that, but not $300,000.
Ally?
And
You don't-
yeah, I was not through it, but in the $260,000 Quechee Village scoping study. I mean, I live out there to Quechee, but I don't live in the village. it's a lot of money for a scoping study for sidewalks.
Would you rather?
And
Yeah, it's.
so
It does say scoping.
This scoping study.
So, and then-
And then-
That identified it as a project,
Oh.
go into engineering and construction. The 260,000 will be for doing the engineering, so we can go into the construction phase.
260 grand to engineers.
They also mentioned the reserve funding for
Right.
that over 3 years of 87,000.
Right.
So that could be another way to. do it.
Yeah, I would suggest that going into reserve funding for that.
Kim and then Rocket.
Yeah, my list includes some of what's already been discussed, including bringing housing down to 150,000, moving the HPD wellness into the operating budget, taking out the Vertra HPD 88,588 for this purpose. Maybe it's a future purchase. And also taking out the Quechee Village engineering scoping, and also potentially bringing the Lyman Park amount down to 75,000.
Yeah, I was gonna suggest Lyman Park reduction there too, so.
I think you can.
Mr. Chair.
Yep, Rocket.
I would make a suggestion to the board that since the way we started this evening was by approving the ARPA funds for DPW, because it was sort of seen as a not contentious, we all agreed on it, that maybe we go through some of the items that we all might find consensus on, and then work from there as the budget narrows down.
You mean looking back at the public work ones we approved?
No, just the way that we started, we approved those because we said, listen, that's probably things that we're all gonna need for ARPA, so we have approved it. So I feel like some things on here, for me, a camera system at public safety building seems to make obvious sense. To me, the refurbishing the engine 3 seems to make obvious sense, especially with the $750,000 cost savings. I mean, are there any strong objections to that? I feel like maybe if we can start working on different specific line items where there's broad consensus across the board, we can start working our way towards that 1.4, or in my opinion, 1.2.
Well, yeah, maybe we could do that. I mean, I think I'm hearing some consensus on things where people think maybe we could come down, like the planning, housing, development reserve fund, the Quechee Village, Willard Road engineering projects. I think people do want to move the wellness from the police into the operating budget. Ally?
Kim has her hand up.
Oh, Kim?
Well, I just wanted to chime in on a couple things. Actually, first, a small-ish one, but H. Corey did make formal requests for ARPA funding to pay for the community safety review. That's not in here, and so if not, I hope we can also get that into the operating budget. There was an opportunity for a grant that the more I looked into it, I don't think it's a qualified purpose for the grant funding. So just that, I'd love to know if Gail has any thoughts on that. And I have one other point. Should I make it now or wait?
You can make it now.
I wonder, Gail, in the changing the local option tax from cemeteries to libraries, and that resulted in a $211,000 decrease to the tax burden. Do you have you already sort of reallocated that, or is that potentially, I know we're also talking about adding reserve fund, adding reserve accounts and things like that. It's not going to be, but I'm just wondering, is if that $211,000 is something that is potentially on the table for something like a solid waste facility study or something like that.
I have not assigned it anywhere else.
So it could be just a net thing. So in either way, if we take that off the tax burden by switching those local option tax targets, if we're talking about things like moving the HPD wellness over to the operating budget, creating reserve funds, I mean, it's going to level out. But I guess I would also like to ask the board that this community safety review be funded, because I think we're on track for an RFP to go out, I hope in February.
How much?
Do you
is
have
it?
any idea how much it's gonna cost?
I'm gonna guess 50 to 60,000. But I don't know yet, because we haven't gotten the. I mean, I think Norwich had done a request and gotten some in the $60,000 range. Brattleboro's was in the $30,000 range, but it was a few years ago. And I think we do have, or at least I thought we had some from the community wellness, right? We had we had community wellness funds set aside or encumbered. Some of that was used for the peer support advocate. And I think the previous town manager had suggested that the rest of that could be used to fund the assessment, the community safety assessment, but it won't be enough.
That's new to me. And I do have a thing on the peer support to talk about for ongoing items when
Okay.
we're actually talking about the operating budget, but I'm not aware of funding that was set aside to cover the community safety review or assessment.
I'm gonna look, I think it came up recently. I'll come back on that, but I'll lower my hand for now.
Oh, thanks, Kim. It sounded like there was possibly some agreement between all of us on not funding the Quechee Village engineering study for 260.
Right.
Do I have a fourth person so we can start knocking things out?
I'm one.
How are we gonna,
Yeah.
how are we gonna fund that?
No, it's just not in our.
It's just not from ARPA.
Are you making a decision that you don't want to fund it from ARPA?
I
Or
think
you
that
want to
is-
remove the project completely?
I think
So those are two questions.
removing funding it through ARPA is what we were talking about. Because you mentioned it would delay, right? But with reserves of 87,000 a year, it'd be ready to go.
Right, you'd either jumpstart it right now and start working on it, or originally, you know, you can do it over 3 or 4 years of funding it at $87,000 a year.
So my opinion on that specific stretch of Quechee is that there is no sidewalk that I know of, right? And it is very narrow street, but
There is, but it's pretty well destroyed.
well, there's a sidewalk up to Simon Pierce, right? And then
There was one up to,
but
Little bit,
in
yeah.
any case, I mean, I think a lot of that, the central pedestrian area, which is down to the falls up by Simon Pierce, there is a sidewalk there. Beyond that, up to the library on towards the base of Willard, there is no sidewalk there. So I do see that, but it seems like a lot of money to $250,000 seems like a large expense to put in ARPA. So I would be comfortable having that, pushing that to conversation to CIP reserve, because that would be a new reserve fund that we would create, right? So I would be comfortable kicking the can on that.
Everyone's okay with that?
I'd accept it, yeah.
Yeah,
Because
I mean, it's hard to just.
Yeah.
Cut out a lot of stuff in this, because they're all good projects, but we gotta try and do that.
Dan, did you, I didn't see put your thumbs up. Are you in agreement to cutting that? Okay.
Manny?
Yeah, so I want to step back and look at Parks and Rec again. So I do think cutting some out of Lyman Park would be a wise thing to do. I question spending $72,000 on electric mowers. The life expectancy of batteries versus going with internal combustion engines and the cost of internal combustion engines. It's a lot of money to spend on 2 mowers when we could get 2 gas-driven ones for half the cost. And I know that we've said we want to try to do something towards environmental sustainability, but there has to be something out there for mowers that are low emission mowers that we can look into versus getting 2 electric mowers. Has anybody looked at lower emission mowers?
Gail and then Rocket.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Dana, do you want?
Yeah,
Yeah, so let me reach out to some folks and get a comparison, because I don't think that the upfront cost might be more, but I think in maintenance and fuel costs, we'll probably recoup that in several years, but let me talk to some experts on that before I make that statement.
it would be nice to have a cost of ownership on electric motors, and maybe they haven't been out long enough to have a cost of ownership yet, but it'd be worthwhile to understand cost of ownership of electric versus cost of ownership for internal combustion. You still have the same blades and, you know, things and stuff you gotta take care of, but I would really like to see that come back, because it's, and I know we have a commitment to environmental sustainability, but it's a lot of money for that.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, is that the town didn't.
I understand.
vote to have it, and eventually we're all gonna have to, as painful as it is, take those steps.
But I mean, I just wonder if the cost for electric mowers will start coming down in the future. I don't know whether you could have any input on whether the cost of this stuff is gonna decrease in the future for us, or it's.
So-
Prices are going, I have no crystal ball.
So Dana, for Thursday, that will be your homework assignment.
This one overarching question I have is for things like, you know, you look at the $300,000 planning and development, or the 200,000 or 175 for the Lyman Park. I mean, if we just go and say, we'll give you half that, is that helpful or hurtful?
Right.
You know, I mean, it's just cutting numbers without really knowing whether.
Right, you're either
That
gonna fund
helps.
it all or don't fund it at
Yeah,
all.
that's what it is.
Okay.
Yeah. 'Cause I always think,
Yeah, but at Lyman Point Park, you could do something for half the money.
Right,
You know,
right, yeah.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I am going to just make I think in the interest of moving forward, I'll just put out my opinion on Parks and Rec here, which is that I think going with the skid steer sounds great. I actually am very supportive of these 2 electric mowers, the more I think about them, but I would rather see that put into CIP, because I think that the technology being new, it might be worth seeing, hopefully if the price comes down, but also if the technology improves, and just chipping away towards that. But I do think this is a great step towards not just sustainability, but I actually think the lifetime cost might be lower. So it might be worth doing. I think it would be better in CIP. And then Lyman Park, for me, I'm kind of on the fence about, because I'm very supportive of doing that, but it does feel like an all or nothing. And it does feel like a pretty large bite.
Wouldn't that otherwise, I mean, doing it all at once, right, like that?
It
Has something to
actually
do
would
with the
be
reserve.
cost savings. I mean, you do it all at once.
Do it all at once. Right, so I could also see that being a CIP, but 200 out of 1.4 or 1.2 is 16%. I also do want to comment that I think that Kim made a great point mentioning H. Corey. I brought it up earlier and then I forgot. I think we also need to be conscientious to set aside some money for citizen requests, organizational requests. That is something that we talked a lot about as a board last year. And we did field some feedback. And I think that making sure that we leave space for that conversation would be worthwhile.
Do you have a list of those items?
I do, but I don't really, I'll have to dig those out. Yeah, but I remember having a pretty extensive conversation, especially with West Hartford Library. And I remember that there were a lot of requests, citizens requests that came in that actually came in also through department, right? So some of that was Maxfield, for example, on the CIP requests. And I do remember those, someone had requested a track. But I could come up with that list and send it to everyone. But I just think that we should make sure that we think about that as well. So I think with Parks and Rec, just to summarize, I would be supportive of earmarking the 80,000. I would push on the 72, and then I'm on the fence about the 200. I would leave that to the board's discretion, or maybe something to revisit at the end of the chat.
Okay.
Can I just make a suggestion?
Yes,
You-
please.
You were on the path of taking things out.
Yeah.
So are there any other items that you would like to have removed from the ARPA funding completely?
Like completely just take them out.
Well, correct. Not necessarily that they're going away as a project, but you do not want to fund them by ARPA.
Yeah, I think we got the Willard Road for 260
Correct.
and the police wellness for 14.5. So we're at 274,000. Manny, we're probably just gonna have to start making some decisions.
So Connie did put forth a suggestion to not fund the Virtua system.
right.
And
Ken
that's
also
a
said-
third option. So as much as the system is beneficial to the police department, we've done without that system. And I just wonder if I just think we should not fund that, because it's a lot of money to fund, and it would help us out in other areas.
Okay, that's a suggestion. Al?
Well, I just wonder, because I think we had also maybe asked if we could see that number revisited to see if it could be, if there were other options. So maybe I wouldn't want to make that decision until we know what those options are, which I think we might have on Thursday. So,
And I think a broader conversation we've been having a lot in our community is just with what does policing look like moving forward? And because of that, I am very supportive of the system. I think the more training we can have and utilizing technology to offer that might be a interesting proactive solution for us. So I would be happy to press pause and see what might be adjusted.
Danny?
If we were to push one cruiser to CIP, $75,000 reduction,
Mhm.
what the board's thoughts are. What's that, Kim?
I was just agreeing with that, Lanny just said.
Yeah. Everybody
I could do that. We
on board
support
with
one
that?
with ARPA and one with CIP.
Yep.
Yeah, I can do that.
We all good with that?
Yeah.
All right, so that's another 75. We cobble this together.
Just as long as you realize with that particular item,
Right.
by moving it from ARPA, you need to fund it in the regular reserve account.
Yeah, but you say we're already coming down in other areas of the regular account. so-
Correct, but I just want to
Yeah.
make sure that
No, I
it's
understand.
not a negotiable item.
And what about the Bertra? Is that something we wanna?
Well,
with our-
like Ally said, we did tell them that we
Oh,
would
yeah, that's right.
look
what
at,
we're
so,
supposed to say.
yeah, so I agree with her. We should wait until we hear back from,
Camera system.
Yes, I think we're all in agreement of
well,
camera system.
both, Dan has his hand up.
Okay, Dan, and then Kim?
One thing I kind of want to revisit a little bit is, depending on what Rocket finds out, is the Quechee, that group, the bridge group, whatever, I forget their title. I feel like that's $50,000 that's sitting on the table. And I think that the town should perhaps step up and at least match that to move those things forward. They've invested a lot of money there, which hasn't been as a result of the taxpayers. So I think we need to sort of throw them a lifeline and say, we thank what you're doing. We'll match what you've raised to make those things happen. And because I kind of sometimes feel like Quechee and West Hartford are sort of, the ugly stepchild of the village, and that we don't do so much for them out there. So I think that to do something like that is a nice gesture to move forward. So if there's a way to consider how we might do that based on what Rocket finds out, I'd like to revisit that.
Thank you, Dan.
so I
And then I think Kim had her hand.
I put it back down.
I put it
I
back
have a
down.
question about that.
Rocket, I mean, Lanny, go
Yeah.
ahead.
If we offer, can we offer them just 50? Or do they want the whole thing?
Well, I think they were getting 50 contingent on us providing 150.
Well, I-
Right,
a little
so-
unclear.
It
So
was-
that's
yeah.
what I emailed and we'll see.
Okay,
Yeah, if we're not gonna get it, by us giving them 50,000, if it's not gonna get the remainder of it, it's off the
the
table.
way I look at this right now is like the biggest ticket items, one's the fire engine 3, but I think we heard pretty good testimony that that's gonna end up actually saving us
Yeah,
a
yeah.
lot of money. The other one is the 300,000 for the housing development reserve fund. That's, if it's either funded or not, and not, that's the item that gets us down, and
Well, the 200,000 from,
if anyone wants to take the parking meters off there, that's fine. with me.
No,
I'm
But, I mean,
it's not.
the 300,000, the 300,000 is the big ticket item, right? So we gotta decide what we. If that stays in, then we need to start cutting some other stuff, right? Ally?
Is that one of the exceptions, because it is proposed as a reserve fund, in so many words, that we could say we fund part of it versus the whole thing.
Housing development?
Yeah.
Yeah,
housing
we
development.
already spoke about that, 150. that was
Have
it.
we agreed that we would consider moving it to 150?
Someone
Well, we mentioned
Post
that, but
that.
then we also heard it's probably best to fund or not, fund, right?
So
Right, like fund all of it or not, right? Don't cut it in
But
half.
this particular.
no, not this.
Or is that just okay, so
Just
for
that.
this one, that would be great.
Mr. Chair.
Okay,
I would say that we don't support this. And the reason is because the reserve fund, obviously, it's mentioned that ARPA can't go to reserve. So this is sort of us covering other expenditures, which are not listed here, so that cost savings can be put into a reserve fund. Is that correct in my understanding? That's my understanding. And so I think, given that there is not a specific request, like, what those actual line items are, I would say that we just push on this one and discuss further. Also, to be clear, this money is not going towards building any housing. It's really So it's not going to result in an increase in housing stock directly. The fund itself, my understanding is to help lay conditions so that there may be more housing. So we're really like, by allocating any ARPA funds here, it's towards, Lori, am I wrong? Oh, please educate me. I don't want to waste everyone's time speaking ignorance.
You guys have a very difficult decision to make, and I really respect that. So don't feel as if you're saying no, that I don't interpret that you don't understand that it's a valuable program. Okay, but I do want to just clarify it, that the idea is that individuals who want to develop housing could use a fund here to help get that going through technical assistance, through reduction in terms of their actual layout of cost, help leverage conventional loans, that kind of thing. So it will result in actually getting accessory dwelling units constructed.
So it'd be a revolving fund of sorts?
Excuse me?
Is it a revolving fund? Would they pay us back or is it just?
Well, they can't, yeah, we can set it up as a revolving fund so that the funds can get used more in the future, but it is, the idea is to get them built in the next 2 years.
So if we allocate ARPA money, where would that money be spent? Because that would be going to the housing fund itself, would it?
No, I'm talking about that we're creating a new program. So I guess I'm not understanding your question, so.
So the Housing Development Reserve Fund that you've listed here is basically what you just mentioned, which would be the equivalent of a revolving fund or some sort of program that we would develop. Is that
Right, so if I could take back the words of reserve and put them aside and just treat this like any other straight out funded activity, I think that might be the easier way to clarify that.
Okay.
And then the funds would be loaned out, or they could be direct subsidies. Those are things that can be decided depending on how fluid you want to be in recycling the dollars over time.
So you're proposing ARPA 300,000 to a fund, a housing development fund,
A housing development
that
fund.
would then be utilized in this manner.
Right.
So I don't think I think that's actually an interesting idea, but I don't know that.
Can we seed it like 100,000,
Whatever.
you know,
yeah,
instead of going and
it's-
see how it ends up
it's gonna
working?
be- I'm looking at it as the more money you put in, the more
Yeah.
people that can take advantage of it. If you want to do less, that's fine. And I thoroughly understand that you've got to find cuts. So
Yeah.
I respect that. Don't feel like you have to do this.
Well, I think there are so many precedents of revolving funds and different things like this that work to stimulate, but I think that it would make me feel more comfortable if we saw actual parameters of the program before we funded it. Because otherwise, in absence of that, we're going to earmark those funds and not know how that's going to be spent yet. Is that correct?
Helen?
I'm still in support of considering 150,000, but I also see that Kim has her hand up.
Kim and then Mary?
Also, yeah, my thought was 150,000 for that, I believe. And then I also just wanted to, Mike, respond to your parking meter concern. And I think that ARPA is 100% the most appropriate and best use. Like the parking meters would be, I think, one of the most productive things we could do with ARPA money.
Thank you. So, I'm sorry, Mary.
That's okay. I was just gonna say, I'm still in support of some money for the housing. I think that's been an issue that I think 3/4 of the time we get from the people in town. So I think we've got to do something to jumpstart this ourselves.
So if we did 150, right, that could be some seed money to see how it goes, right?
But
And then,
we have no idea how this money would be spent.
well, we have some idea, I think, how it would be spent.
No, I think we have no idea because the program hasn't been developed yet. We
Yeah,
could
but we don't
develop it. I'm completely for developing something like this. I think it would be a good idea, but I'm not sure that we should every department has come in with very, very specific requests, including planning department, about every single line item. There's been very detailed proposals about how that money would be spent. This is, I think, one of the singular items where it's a concept, and I think a great concept, but without the details of how that would actually be implemented. And given the requirements of the 2026 expenditure requirement, I don't feel comfortable saying, let's set aside $150,000 without knowing how that's actually going to be implemented. I think it might be better to put it towards programs that are already very, very specifically lined out. And then we can revisit with a CIP or reserve fund to create a fund like this.
So I'm hearing from most people, they are okay with doing it 150, Lanny, or at least a majority.
Yeah.
And if we add that, then we're up to almost 500,000 that we've cut out. From ARPA. So we're getting close.
I'm fine with that. I do have, one thing I'd like to discuss is the Sykes Mountain Avenue sidewalk scoping project. Chambers.
Can
we have-
finish on the item first? So
We did.
Do we have? We get sort of just the consensus. Are people okay with 150 and that 158,000 for planning for the housing development reserve?
Yeah.
Okay, I think we have a majority. We got thumbs up from Dan. And Ken. Okay, so.
So what do we have
Lanny,
left?
What's that?
What do we have left?
Well, so what we have, I think Lanny wanted to talk about
Yeah,
the.
the sidewalk
Sykes
scoping
Mountain. We're getting close. We're at like 500,000 taken out.
Knowing with the understanding, though, it may change once we get the information back on the open items.
Right.
Yep, understood.
So sidewalk scoping project on Sykes Avenue. We have a sidewalk currently on the other side of the street, correct?
We do, but given the grades and the curves in the road at that point, and how it's coming from the Chamber Park, this is one of those areas that, from a safety perspective, we felt it really needed to be put there. So, again, this is, the feasibility study will help define what the best route is to get from the Chambers Park.
Could we put a crosswalk in there at that point, or is that not?
Well, sometimes putting crosswalks in don't necessarily, and where to put a crosswalk, like I said, this isn't an area where it's quite windy,
I've been out there.
steep, and I would be reluctant to say what the possible solution should be for that, so. It isn't, that's just this response.
I just see that, that $20,000 for a sidewalk when there's one already there on the other side of the street. I question whether we really need to spend the money on that when there's a sidewalk there on the other side.
I could pass on it too.
Thoughts on that one? We want to
Was
take
that
that
Rocket?
one out?
I could pass on it as well.
Yeah, Rocket says he could pass. I don't know.
Mary, Ally, Dan,
Yeah,
Kim,
I think I-
thoughts on removing the 20,000 Sykes Mountain Ave scoping project?
Question for Lori.
Dan has a thumbs down.
No, Dan wants to keep it.
Wait, which one is that? The Sykes Ave?
Yeah, 20,000.
The 20,000 Sykes Mountain Avenue sidewalk scoping.
Yeah, I'm in favor of keeping that, but with the Quechee Village project, I think we can put some funds in reserve for engineering and work toward that, but not do it this year.
We already talked about.
That would be through CIP and not through ARPA.
Why can't we do the same thing for Sykes Mountain?
Yes, and Lori, I have a question about the Sykes Mountain Ave. I know there's a section of Sykes Mountain that doesn't have a sidewalk and it kind of goes right along that grassy strip on the left side of the road as you're heading up the hill. Is- Sorry,
The butternut.
the butternut, yeah, next to the neighborhood there.
So when that was designed, you actually can just walk right into the development that is town road.
Right.
And there's a sidewalk there, then you come out the other end. It's just little jog into the development
through
to
the
use the
neighborhood.
sidewalk there.
I see, that's a connector.
Can I see by a show of hands who would support taking out the 20,000 ARPA for Sykes Mountain? So it looks like Lanny, Rocket, Mike, Mary. So I think we're gonna take that out for right now. That's 20,000, which means we've now shaved off 519,500.
So just catch us up. Can you tell us what it is that you have?
So what I have is 260,000 from Willard Road, 14,500 from the police wellness program, which will go into the budget, 75,000 for one police cruiser, 150,000, which is half of the requested amount for the housing development reserve fund, and then 20,000 for Sykes. Which means we are what, 9,000 short of where we need to be, 10,000 short.
What was your second item after the 260?
That was the police wellness, 14,000, that would just go into budget.
Mike, do you have the reducing Lyman Point Park on that?
Which one, Ken?
Reducing.
Oh, we don't have the Lyman Park's the one, right? We do have to fund it all
Right.
or not because of the project, right? Essentially. Maybe not. We're waiting to hear. It is kind of a moving target too. It's 175 to 2.
Yeah, so you did mention the electric mowers. I'm not sure you had that on your list that you just.
I don't know if we agreed to take those off.
No, we did not agree.
I'm just mentioning that. As far as Lyman Park goes, yeah, in order to do it all and to do it without depositing it into the reserves, I suggest that if you are going to reduce Lyman Park project, I still need to have a conversation to understand whether or not the reserve is going to make up that difference over time. So, we're looking at potentially not funding the reserves for a period of time in order to do one project completely 100% versus doing a little here, a little there as we build our reserve fund up over the course of several years. So
Okay.
I would recommend that you fund it all.
Yeah. What if we gave you one electric mowing unit for 36,000 from ARPA and took the other one off from ARPA? I mean, is that something that might make sense?
But you'd fully fund the park?
Yeah.
I think we should.
I think
What
so.
if we move both electric mowers to CIP? And we table the park until we get through a couple other hard.
Well, I think the
chats.
park's got support from a majority.
I mean, I love the idea of the park.
Um,
I think we just need to talk about,
So what do we think about the electric mowing units?
Well, we've already asked Dana to come back. I
He's gonna come back. and give us an opinion.
mean, we really can't just cut him out when we're looking for him to come back and.
it won't hurt us to table more things because we're waiting on information about the electric mowers and on Vertra and on Quechee Friends of the
We
Bridge.
do have to get another 10,000 at least before we end the meeting.
Oh, yeah, I just think that we could
I
be a
don't
little,
think it's necessary because we still need to know, the friends are, we have some open items. So I
Okay.
think you've made quite a bit of progress. I'm happy with what you've made for progress so far.
Okay, good.
And I think with the open items that we have, just to recap them to make sure that we know, this department's gonna come back with a reduction, training price. DPW, price of the plan, assessment, what we need for that,
Wait a minute.
for solid waste,
Oh, solid waste, yes,
Yeah.
okay.
the assessment. Dana's gonna follow up on hybrid mowers or thing, whatever they're called.
Reduce low E mowers, low E fuel mowers there.
So that's what we have. And then Rocky, you're gonna follow up with the Friends of Quechee.
Okay, and
And,
I think we have the list so far. I don't know if you follow Gail, of ones we think we'll take out of ARPA,
I
just
got
so we
you.
have that.
You'll email us.
should we
all.
slug it out about parking meters before we?
No, I'm not gonna win that.
The last,
No, I don't.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
did we say, I thought we said also for Thursday, engineering reserve funds?
Correct.
Yep, the actual
Yeah,
number.
sorry, I had written it down, but I
Yeah.
didn't say it
But
out
that'll
loud.
be CIP. right?
What was the dollar amount that we were?
For
looking
the
at for
engineering reserve,
Yeah,
we're waiting to hear from Jeremy.
okay, so we don't have.
So we'll have that for Thursday, but, okay.
Is there any other items that you need from any of the department heads?
Anyone?
Supporting what they.
Speak now, forever hold. your
For our
peace.
phone, no.
Good.
Kim has a question. I have.
Can I jump in?
Yep.
Gail, I don't know if you want this now. Can I ask just to follow up on something for the regular operating budget
Yeah,
now?
absolutely. I planned on doing that, but now we're at 9:20, so we kind of took a little bit longer than we expected, but certainly ask away.
Just, I know that one of the things I had mentioned in a previous, like, when, it must have been in the town manager budget, was that we kind of looking at budgeting, reinstating the annual awards banquet for employees. And I had asked about if there was a way for us to consider just also a modest annual financial bonus for staff. And I don't think we ever have circled back on that.
No, it's on, I have it on list of items to talk about, so that
Okay.
you had brought up, including, you also had said about the communications and some training and some other items, so. I'm
yeah.
glad that you brought that up.
So will we kind of recap that on Thursday or do you want to see if, how the board feels about it now?
That would be up to the board if you'd like to discuss it now.
I think we can recap it till Thursday. We've made a lot of progress, and I think we're hitting sort of the end of our road. Mary has a quick question.
Yeah,
I'll
this
then
is,
look at
this is just to irritate Mike. No.
it.
No, it's not. Lori, I had a quick question. When you were talking about the parking meters, and talking about how they, they get chalked and the time and they never recoup. I was just wondering, this is just for my own information, when you have parking meters and people go beyond, even though you said they usually self-monitor, if people are still looking for parking and someone is sitting there no matter what, it's an hour, 2 hours, and they're beyond, how is that solved?
Well, that's a parking enforcement issue, but it's just, they'll receive a ticket.
Right.
And then they'll have to pay the ticket. And
Okay.
I guess if something becomes abandoned on the town road, but that's basically what will happen.
It's just, I'm finding more and more people today who just don't care if they're ticketed for things and if they pay late fees and stuff like that. So it just is really difficult. So I was just wondering, that was just,
And there is
for information.
Yeah.
Well, Mary, I think you might have misheard Lori, because Lori, I think said, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you said that when there are parking meters, people tend to self-enforce.
Well, that's what I did
That's
say.
what she was.
I
And
did
not,
say.
but not stay in response.
Well, right, but what you're saying is you're finding that people are,
What they pay tickets. they
Some
even pay the level.
people are saying, I don't care if I have to pay $5.
So I think they self-enforced until they realized that we didn't hire a parking enforcement officer, and then it doesn't do us anything.
Well,
I have a couple questions
Look at
just for information for the next meeting.
Yeah, for next meeting.
Yeah, so Lori, as you know, I'm a bit hesitant about this housing development fund. If there are more details you could provide for us, I know that the board has nominally supported that. I suspect we're going to reach a point with ARPA where we're going to have to revisit some of the numbers and finagle them. So I would love more details on any ideas you have on that would be great.
so I guess I'd just like to get a little bit more clarity. Are you looking for, because I've given you the ideas that we've been discussing and the
Sure.
things that we want to put in place, and it's
Yeah.
a matter of putting together the procedures and getting agreement on it.
Yeah.
I'm trying to understand a little bit more
We
about
just
what
have-
you'd like me to provide to you.
To my knowledge, we have no documentation of what that fund looks like, and this is the first time the fund's been discussed in a public forum. So I would just love to know with confidence, I'm happy to support a fund like this, but I would love to know with confidence that what the money that we're earmarking for, how that would be allocated or spent, just would give me some peace of mind. And I also think that may be a relevant information if we have to rediscuss and shuffle around things in the next conversation.
Thank you,
So,
Sheila.
Even just one page, and then I have, Mr. Chair, I have one other, this is for Kim H. Corey with the Community Safety Review, which is, I am curious to know how that is materially different than what HCC is taking on, because I know they're doing community listening sessions. And if there might be more cost-effective ways for us as town leadership, we have a tremendous staff that is out and about in the community to feel that feedback and why that $50,000 or $60,000 marginal increase would be.
I think that's a
Perfect.
question for Thursday.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm just saying, these are, you mentioned questions for Thursday to. speak
Also,
next.
in the meantime, Rocket, you could go onto the town website and I can send you a link because I can't describe how to get there, but it's under, there is a place for bids and requests for proposals. And the original RFP that was sent out, I think that both Acting Chief Kelly and Chief Cooney are doing some modifications to that before it gets re-released. But if you look at the RFP, you can see specifically what it is that we're looking for.
That'd be great. If you could send an email, a link to that, that'd be awesome.
Great, Lenny, and
Okay.
then Gail has something, then I think.
Are you,
we're ready to go.
Are you planning on putting a pin in it for tonight then, or?
Yeah.
So, well, so we're not gonna do a recap of the budget?
Well, Gail,
Do I wait until Thursday for that, or?
I think so. I mean, I think everyone understands what we approved and what we
Well,
have for open questions.
well, I have questions about the budget still, so
Well-
I don't know if we wanted to bring that up under budget recap or they want to do that now.
We can, I had planned on doing it this evening. I hadn't planned on taking as long as we did on
Yeah.
the CIP and the ARPA.
You had two other things you said you wanted to get through and we never got there yet. So that's why I.
Well, it's our agenda for Thursday. It's going over all this again for a final recap, right? And we did a lot of the lengthy, difficult decisions tonight,
So
I think.
changes, I had given the recommendation about switching libraries and cemeteries. So I need to know if I can if you as a board agree to that. And so I can make that change in the budget, because I'd like to bring a budget forward. So we'll have a solid number. We can go up and down as we're working on Thursday to make those final adjustments. And then also, we're all in agreement for the 75,000 for the cruiser that's coming out of ARPA that will be funded. So that will need to be added.
Yeah.
And then the 14.5 for the wellness.
Okay.
So I just want to make sure that I can make those solid changes, knowing that everybody's in agreement. So we're gonna have a working document to go from there.
So everyone else do that?
Kim
Oh,
has her hand
Kim?
up.
And funding community safety review. And funding community safety review.
Was that, I had it written on the ARPA question for ARPA.
I think that was a question whether we wanted to do it with ARPA.
So,
Yes, Lenny?
so I want to focus back again, that the ARPA funds are intended to be for infrastructure, rebuilding what's broken. And not that community safety is not important, but it's something that we can fund through other means other than ARPA funds. And
I have no preference as to how it's funded. It was requested originally as ARPA. I don't have a preference for that, but I think we also know that the guidelines changed and it's the American Rescue Plan Act. It is not now limited to only infrastructure projects. But I agree with that sentiment in general. And I don't have a preference for.
And I think the question too was like the amount, right, Kim? And that's like for Thursday, we're gonna discuss and decide.
I don't have any more on ARPA, but I do have a budget question, anybody. Do you want me to bring that up now?
Yeah.
Do you have a budget question?
You have everybody here, so
Okay.
I don't know if it's.
So, yeah, so I wanted to revisit, under Parks and Recs, the allocation for $2,000 for Juneteenth. I think it's great that we're giving $2,000 for Juneteenth. And I'd like to see us expand our outreach for other things in the community as well. I'm part of the VFW and talking to another veteran in town here about allocating some more funds to put up banners on our light poles downtown, close up to 20 banners in support of hometown heroes. You see a lot of towns that you go through and they have banners on there about their veterans service in the community and the dates of service, and to recognize those within our community that have served. And in addition, that's in addition to funding the Juneteenth celebration for 2000. So I'd like to put into the budget $2,225 to help pay for those banners to be placed on the poles. And it's something that we could get with the local Veterans Council to get names of people, and it could be a rotating thing. So you could see like a picture of myself or a picture of Joe up there, you know, and local heroes that have served our community, to recognize them in that manner. And I think it'd be well received in the community.
If I might interject really quickly, if there's anyone
Really
on the,
quickly, please.
it is, yes. I notice all the department heads are still here. If there's no questions left for them, I would love to excuse them. I'm happy to sit and chat.
This is the
It's not
last.
your place to excuse.
Oh, I'm just saying, they've been here all
Well,
the.
Lanny had a budget question, so it's.
It didn't pertain to
So
him.
I guess the question is, do we want to now vote on adding $2,250 for the proposal Lanny has made, or do we want to wait till Thursday to do it?
I would love to see
Kim
the
has an
proposal.
Yeah.
She's gone.
What do you, I don't have I mean, I can vote on it now or then, doesn't matter to
Okay.
me.
Well, let's do it. We don't need an official motion. Lanny, if you want to just repeat what amount of money and what it's for. we
Yeah,
can-
$2,225 to be used for banners for hometown heroes.
Two
Be
parks and
placed
Rec.
for Parks and Rec.
Okay,
To be placed on light poles downtown.
But how does?
all right.
Is it-
All those who are in favor of adding that money, just raise your hand.
It's an irresponsible way to spend the money. I mean, we don't have, a-
$2,250.
but is it for printed banners? Is it for digital sign? Who fixes on it? And how does it change?
It's print, we rotate it on a basis for Memorial Day to celebrate our hometown heroes of Hartford. This is you're saying you do not want to celebrate
I know,
our
I'm
people that
not
Hartford that
opposed
have
to it.
served?
Do not make it about that. I'm not opposed to that. We asked everybody to bring in presentations and we.
Guys,
We go through.
$2,250.
We go through line by line. and We ask the department heads to meticulously review their budgets. We painstakingly make that.
Thank you.
It's not such an irresponsible way for us to spend.
Rocket.
This is no process.
Just let Bill
Absolutely
talk.
not. This is, it's such a disrespect to the
Stop, Bill.
to the departments and to the
You have the
department heads.
floor. Rocket, I'm the chair. I have to manage the conversation.
Sure.
Gail has the floor. Thank you.
So Lori, if we're talking about flags, Lori, could you please comment on that?
So, couple things. First of all, we have a design review requirement for anything going up in our downtown, so we have to meet that. That's a zoning requirement. We've also have a little group that we've been working with to look at how we're going to finish off our infrastructure improvements. And that's where can we put banners, what size of them needs to be, what the design of them should be, and how that integrates with our landscaping plans, whether we put landscaping plant pots on poles, we have some freestanding. So I understand what you're saying, and it may be that we're not specifying what it is if you want to put money towards banners at this point, but that's one where there's multiple processes that have to go forward. And from a design review perspective, I don't know what we would be approving at this point. So I just want to let you know there are processes in place and things that are already moving. So not to say that you don't do this, but I wanted you to have the context in which.
Thank you, Lori. Yeah, so I think taking that into consideration of how much, if you want to do it, with making sure that it's all within
Alvin?
where it needs to be.
Yep.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I'm definitely not opposed to the idea, but it does seem sort of like it's coming a bit last minute, and I'd be curious if there'd be more community engagement around that idea. I could also see a world in which that's maybe something that is an initiative that, VFW supports and the funding for, and then partners with the town to do that, following all the requiremats. At this time, I don't feel comfortable adding that.
Okay, maybe we wait till Thursday for that question, just so we can think about it some more.
Did you have any other ones, Lanny?
No.
Okay, anything else, Gail?
No,
Can I just come in real quick? And I think that the $2,000 for Juneteenth is not currently under Parks and Rec still. It's under boards and commissions under H Corey, correct?
And initially that is where it is, but the request was made by the board to have it moved into community activities underneath Parks and Recreation. Scott went ahead and contacted the individuals to find out how much it would be used and what it was used for. So currently, the way that the budget lives right now, it's in its own line, but you as a board recommended that it get moved to Parks and Recreation, so it's there every year. Is that not the direction that you want it to go?
I believe that's what we did. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Kim. All right, thanks, everybody. We'll take up that question on Thursday. Gail, anything else before we move on? No, that's it. I think that was great work. All right, so consent agenda, none. We don't have any need for the executive session tonight. We may on Thursday, so I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. Someone?
I'll second the motion.
Any seconds? All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Lanny, don't you ever. Such a fun idea. Let's go.